Chapter 419. The method was taught to him by the headmaster of the academy with a stick on the balcony of the building of pines and cranes. Eldest brother also hinted at it in the wilderness. He also thought of the method when he was imprisoned in the cliff cave. The method was simple, clear, and full of power. However, from another perspective, it could be said to be stupid and not in line with Ning Kei's bright but dark outlook on life. Standing on the streets of Chang, and in late spring, Ning Kei thought about what would happen after autumn. He was sometimes excited and sometimes gloomy. He did not notice a cloud floating from the north. "Are you Mr. 13? Ning Kei looked back and saw a man bowing to him respectfully. The man was dressed in ordinary civilian clothes, but it could not hide the stern aura of a soldier. Since last spring, he had become a celebrity in Chang'an. However, not many people had seen his face and could recognize him on the streets of Chang'an. Ning Kei was a little vigilant, especially because of the identity of the man. The man admitted his identity in the next sentence. "General Su Shi requests your presence." The Tang Empire dominated the world with iron armor and swept the world with force. Naturally, they valued and respected soldiers, especially the 4 generals. The Defender General of the state, Su Shi, had fought for decades and gained many military achievements. He had opened up countless territories for the empire. Even Xia Ho, who had been very famous in the past decade, could only look up to him. He was the most powerful person in the military of the empire in terms of military achievements and reputation. Ning Kei knew that the most powerful general did not have a good impression of him. He did not know the specific reason, but he knew that he would meet him sooner or later. However, he did not expect it to be today. He did not expect that he would be tracked by the Tang Empire the moment he left the palace. General Su Shi did not choose to meet Ning Kei at the military ministry. Instead, he chose to meet Ning Kei in the general's mansion near the Vermilion Bird Avenue. It seemed that this was a private conversation. Following the man into the imposing general's mansion, Ning Kei frowned slightly. He was stimulated by the killing aura emitted by the poplars and stones in the mansion. Walking into the depths of the general's mansion, he saw the old general sitting by a desk on a quiet platform. The old general wasn't wearing court robes, official robes, or armor. Instead, he was wearing very ordinary cloth clothes. He wasn't planting cabbages or sharpening knives. Instead, he was holding a rice bowl and eating. The dishes on the table were very simple: 2 bowls of brown rice, a bowl of pork belly, and 3 pieces of boiled vegetables. The man who led Ning Kei into the mansion left quietly. Ning Kei stood outside the stage. After a moment of silence, he walked up the stairs and bowed slightly in front of the old general. The old general said, "Sit." Ning Kei lifted the front lapel of his academy uniform and sat down. He looked across. The old general said, "I didn't expect you to come so soon. Let me finish my meal first. Mr. 13, please don't blame me for being rude." Ning Kei bowed his head and said, "General, your words make me afraid." The old general did not say anything more and continued to concentrate on eating. The old general's hair was white and his dark cheeks were full of wrinkles. He was a little hunched and wore ordinary cloth clothes. He looked like an idle old man that could be seen everywhere in Chang'an. However, when he picked up the chopsticks to pick up the meat, it was as if he was holding a spear and stabbing it into the chest of the enemy general. It was very domineering. Although the general was old, he was not an old general. A general was a general. Especially when facing the enemy. The streaky pork gravy mixed with the brown rice smelled a bit fragrant, but the taste was presumably only average. The general, however, enjoyed it very much. His grizzled beard trembled from time to time, and the 3 pieces of boiled vegetables made crunching sounds as he chewed on them. It was as if those legendary demons from the underworld were gnawing on human bones. Perhaps it was a habit formed during his military career. The general ate very quickly. He swept away all the food on the table like a gust of wind. Then, he picked up the teacup and rinsed his mouth. Ning Kei said, eating too quickly and drinking tea in a hurry is not good for your health. The general looked at him quietly and said, "You don't have to pretend in front of me." Ning Ke fell silent and stopped pretending to be a junior. He pretended to be gentle and considerate. The general said, "Cultivators should come out of the human realm, not enter it." Ning Ke did not expect that the conversation would enter the most critical stage without any foreshadowing or preamble. He could not help but be caught unprepared. He had originally thought that this would be a long conversation. He had thought that this conversation would be like boiling chicken soup and that they would need to test each other's fire control. He did not expect that it would be so fierce and quick. If he was not careful, the vegetables in the pot would become burnt and could no longer be eaten. Why not enter the human realm? Ning Ke asked after a moment of silence. The general looked into his eyes and said indifferently, "Because for cultivators, the human world is too weak. They are like ants. It is easy for cultivators to become arrogant when they enter the human realm." Ning Ke raised his head and looked back at the general's calm and oppressive eyes. He said, "General, you have fought for the Tang Empire and have been in the human world for decades. Before being a cultivator, I am first a soldier." The general said indifferently, "That is the biggest difference." Ning Ke said, "I am also a soldier." The general shook his head slowly and said, "You used to be a soldier and an excellent one. But unfortunately, you were not a cultivator when you were a soldier." "What's the difference?" Ning Ke asked. The general squinted and looked at him. He said in a low voice, "If you could cultivate in the city of Wei, I would have trained you well and made you a great martial cultivator. Then you would have been able to truly understand what is going on the battlefield. Then the stories later would not have happened." Ning Ke said after a moment of silence, "I don't understand what you mean. I have seen all your files." The general's voice was emotionless and calm. "You are indeed a good soldier. But you have not experienced a real battle with cultivators." Ning Ke fell silent again. He had joined the army in the city of Wei when he was very young. But the Tang Empire was so powerful that even the cavalry of the Golden Palace on the grassland did not dare to provoke them. He had not experienced a real battle. He had not seen the performance of cultivators on the battlefield during his years of military service in the frontier fortress. The general said, "People think that cultivators are very powerful. But they do not know that on the real battlefield, cultivators are also very weak when facing the surging cavalry." Ning Ke thought of a powerhouse like Second Brother and could not agree with this statement. The general seemed to know what he was thinking and said coldly, "Even a powerhouse in the knowing destiny state can only die when facing the sky full of arrows and the charge of thousands of heavy cavalry. This has been proven countless times in the history of war." "Do you know why?" Ning Ke shook his head. The general said, "Because the cultivator's body is too weak. Unless he can cross the threshold and break through the 5 states and enter the limitless state, he can ignore the rain of arrows. Or he can enter the Tianqi state and understand the supreme power given by Haotian, he can ignore any impact. Otherwise, a cultivator alone will never be a match for an army." "What about powerhouses at the peak of martial arts like the general or General Xiao?" Ning Ke asked. General Sushir said, "Martial arts cultivators use their psyche power to summon the qi of heaven and earth to train their physical strength. They use their psyche power to condense the qi of heaven and earth on the surface of their bodies. However, as long as one is human, his sense of perception will be limited. His psyche power will eventually run out. If one person cannot kill him, then 100 people cannot. I will use 10,000 people to kill him. Remember, if a powerhouse at the peak of martial arts is invincible, why does the empire need to keep so many cavalry?" Ning Ke placed his right hand on the table and looked into the general's deep eyes. He said, "One cultivator can exchange for 10,000 ordinary soldiers. Isn't that powerful?" The general looked at him expressionlessly and said, "There is not even one cultivator among 10,000 ordinary people. There are not many cultivators in the world who can fight against 10,000 people. Exchanging 10,000 ordinary soldiers for the death of a cultivator like this is a very worthwhile thing to do in war. Ning Ke was silent for the third time. He turned to look at the upright poplar trees in the garden and the stones piled randomly. He had to admit that the first person in the Empire's military was right and incisive. He could not refute it. He knew very well what General Su Shi wanted to talk to him, so he was not willing to be convinced. He frowned slightly and said, "But you and General Xiahou are also cultivators." At this point, the conversation had returned to the beginning. The cultivation of martial arts is difficult and clumsy. Without decades of hard work, there is no effect at all. Most people give up halfway when they have some brute strength and muscles. They become the servants of sword masters and psyche masters. So for the cultivation sex, the cultivation of martial arts is almost useless. The general said, "Only in the army can a martial arts cultivator have the chance to grow through bloody battles. To cultivate to the peak, who knows how many people they have to kill and how many times they have to be injured?" Ning Ke asked, "What does this have to do with what you want to say?" "What I want to say is that all martial arts cultivators are in the army. Just like what I told you at the beginning, whether in the eyes of the world or in their own eyes, they are strictly disciplined soldiers first, then so-called cultivators. They do not carry umbrellas in summer and do not wear fur coats in winter. They have less selfish desires." "I understand." Ning Ke looked at the leftover juice of the boiled vegetables on the plate and said, "But I don't understand what you are trying to tell me by saying this." The general looked at him expressionlessly and said, "What I want to tell you is that you are very weak. No matter how fast your cultivation level has improved, in my eyes and in the eyes of the Tang military, you are still very weak. With a single order from me, the armored black cavalry can charge at you and kill you. You only have 13 arrows. How many times can you swing a saber like the one used against Luiqing? So don't be arrogant. You must know how to respect the law of the Tang Empire." Ning Ke raised his head and looked at the general's old face. He said, "I have always been law-abiding." The general said coldly, "As I said, I have checked all your files and information. Since it is not limited to the records in the city of Wei. I know how many horse gangs by the Shubi Lake died under your knife. I also know that 3 families of hunters in Min Mountain were burned to death by you. As I said, don't pretend in front of me." The general said coldly, "Killing the horse gangs and chopping firewood is fine because the law of the Tang Empire does not protect people outside the borders. But how are you going to explain what happened in Min Mountain? One of the families had a newborn baby who also died in the fire. How are you going to explain it? No matter how you hide in front of the headmaster of the academy in His Majesty, no matter what image you have in the eyes of the world, no matter how frivolous and funny you pretend to be after you come to Chang'an, you can't change the fact that you are a shameless, cold-blooded, greedy, and murderous villain." Ning Ke lowered his head again and said nothing. He did not expect that the Tang Empire could investigate someone so far in the past. At this moment, he felt that his clothes had suddenly disappeared, as if he was naked. This feeling was not shame or guilt, but vigilance and uneasiness. He had never thought of himself as a good person, and he had never wanted to be one. In order to survive, in order to let Sang Sang live, he would do anything. Killing and arson were just ordinary things. The evil deeds that the general exposed were just an inconspicuous part of the bloody past. How could a person like him be a good person? Su Shi looked at him and said with disgust, "Ning Ke, you are not a good person." There was dead silence on the platform. Ning Ke suddenly raised his head and looked at Su Shi, who was sitting across the table. He asked with a smile, "General, is there really a person as clean and guiltless as snow in the world?" The general looked at him and said with a slight mockery, "Do you want to comfort yourself with the filth of others?" Ning Ke shook his head and said, "General, you talked about how difficult it is to be a martial cultivator and the suffering of the Tang Empire's soldiers. To me, it is a little boring. Because you have not experienced my life, you do not know what I have suffered. Naturally, you cannot understand the choice I made in the past." He looked at the general and said with a smile, "In the deep forest of the mountains, you were caught by a hunter. For some reason, it could be because you stole a rabbit from his snare 10 days ago, or because the hunter was a damned rabbit to begin with, or because the hunter was a relative of the damned old hunter. In short, he wanted to kill you. What would you do? The general frowned slightly. Before the general said anything, Ning Ke continued with a smile, "Don't forget, you were not even 10 years old at that time. You were weak and tired because of malnutrition. You had a 5 or 6-year-old girl with you. You were injured and had no weapon. You only had a fire starter hidden in your crotch. Then you were locked in the woodshed. I don't know what you would do, General. But I would definitely light the thatch and dry wood in the woodshed. I don't care if the hunter died or not. I don't care if there was a baby in the room. Even if there was a paralyzed old man in the room, I would still light the fire." Ning Ke's smile was very gentle, and the expression in his eyes was very calm. The next chapter will be out before midnight. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidien.com to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 420. Su Shi's eyes narrowed. He had fought all his life and seen blood and corpses. He had seen many horrible scenes. However, the gentle smile and calm expression on Ning Ke's face seemed to be more soul-stirring than those scenes he had seen in the past. In an instant, he thought more highly of Ning Ke and was more vigilant about how dangerous Ning Ke was. The sympathy that occasionally flashed in his eyes disappeared without a trace. Ning Ke continued, "Of course, the story of the hunter's family being burned to death has nothing to do with me. I just heard it from others. I'm just curious, under such circumstances, what would you choose? I still want to ask the previous question. Is there really a person as pure as a lotus in the world? General, have you ever killed prisoners of war on the battlefield? Is it against the law of the Tang Empire to kill prisoners of war? General, when your subordinates rode past the fortress, did they kill the women and children of the barbarians on the grassland? If so, is it against the law of the Tang Empire?" Then he looked at the general's old face and asked, "General, as an important minister of the Tang Empire, you should stand on the side of the Tang Empire. However, when the enemy's powerhouses entered the country, you not only did not guard against them, but also revealed my whereabouts to them. I would like to ask, even if this does not violate the law of the Tang Empire, does it violate your conscience?" The repeated requests for guidance were like heavy punches that continuously pounded on the old general's heart. However, Su Shi would not be shaken by Ning Ke's words. He smiled slightly angrily and said, "Since you want to enter the human realm on behalf of the Academy, you have to accept the challenge of the world's powerhouses. Why don't you want to let them know your whereabouts? Are you afraid that you will lose face for the Tang Empire and the headmaster of the Academy?" Before Ning Ke could speak, the general suddenly stopped smiling and looked at him coldly. He said, "Even if it was pardonable that you acted coldly when you were young, what about after coming to Chang'an from the city of Wei?" "After coming to Chang'an?" Ning Ke slowly raised his eyebrows. Suddenly, there was a wind in the garden. It was slightly cold and the sky was dim. It seemed that it was going to rain. "Where were you when the censor Zhang Yiqi died in the 14th year of Tianqi era? Where were you when the old blacksmith in the east of the city died? Where were you when the tea master Yan Suqing died?" The general looked at him and asked indifferently. Ning Ke's expression did not change, but his body became stiff. If his previous questioning of the general was just a small trick, then the general's 3 consecutive questions of, "Where are you?" were really sharp and cold knives that could cut off a person's head. He finally understood why Su Shi was so wary of him and even secretly investigated and suppressed him. He confirmed that many people, starting from Lin Ling to the current number 1 person in the Tang military, had noticed the murders and even smelled the scent behind them. Today, in the general's mansion, the conversation between him and the general. He was a general. When the censor Zhang Yiqi died, you were in the House of Red Sleeves. When Chen Zixian died, you were in the east of the city. When Yan Suqing died, no one knew where you were. However, that day was the Academy's examination. You had a bet with Xie Qingyun of the South Jin Kingdom, but for some reason, you did not attend the examination and even took 2 days of sick leave. The general stared into his eyes and said slowly with endless pressure, "Don't think that you are really strong, don't think that you can really hide from everyone in the world, and don't think that you can erase the past just because you have become the core disciple of the headmaster of the academy. I said that I know everything about you, so I will tell you everything. Not a single thing will be missing. Not a single thing would be missing. Not a single thing could be missing." This was the spirit of the number one person in the Tang military. Ning Ke heard the general say something like this for the 3rd time today. He did not know how many times he fell into silence. There was also silence on the platform. The poplar trees in the garden were slightly trembling in the wind before the rain. The leaves that should have lived in the north whistled, as if they would fall to the ground at any time. No one knew how long it had been. The general said, "The headmaster of the academy once said that the law of the Tang Empire comes first. This is the highest creed not only for the academy, but also for the entire Tang Empire. I will investigate what happened in the past. If I find out that you have violated the law of the Tang Empire, interfered with the court affairs, or even plotted against us, I will punish you according to the law of the Tang Empire." Ning Ke suddenly reached out and stacked the dishes in front of him. Then he stood up, looked at the general and said, "The law of the Tang Empire emphasizes evidence. If you can get the evidence of these murder cases, I will wait for you in the Chang and local government." After saying this, he bowed to the general and left. After walking out of the general's mansion, it was not long before Ning Ke arrived at the familiar Vermilion Bird Avenue. He strolled on the flat bluestone road, looking calm and composed. In the end, someone still guessed that he was related to those murder cases. This made him very nervous, but he was not shocked by the conversation in the general's mansion. Even if Su Shi could represent the entire Tang Empire to sweep the world, he could not accuse Ning Ke without evidence, let alone cause any harm to him. Because he was not a soldier in the city of Wei, nor was he a foreigner who had just arrived in Chang'an. He was now a student of the 2nd floor of the academy and a great calligrapher who was close to His Majesty. If he wanted to harm him now, he must first convince His Majesty, and most importantly, the headmaster of the academy. Ning Ke could not guess His Majesty's attitude, but he was very clear that the headmaster of the academy would not care how many people his student had killed, because the headmaster of the academy did not care about worldly affairs. However, some parts of the conversation in the general's mansion did have some emotional impact on him. Su Shi was right. From the time he escaped from Chang and to the thousands of miles of starvation and entered the dangerous Min Mountain, Ning Ke was, in a way, a person who did all kinds of evil. The reason why he did all kinds of evil was because the world he lived in was full of evil. In order to survive in the evil world, he had to do all kinds of evil. Later, he came to the city of Wei and then to Chang'an. He came to the peaceful and happy world and found that there were still many good people in the world, so he began to try to be a good person in the general sense. Everyone wanted to be a good person. Ning Ke also wanted to be a good person. Therefore, he had been learning how to be a good person since the city of Wei, all the way to Chang'an. This kind of learning could be said to be a kind of disguise, or even more like the formation of a second personality. This kind of personality was very unstable. Sometimes he was mean, sometimes he nagged, and sometimes he pretended to be shameless to win people's favor. It was a little fresh, and a little cute. But the real temperament in his bones was actually still the moment when he held the blood-dripping hatchet in the woodshed of the official of council's mansion when he was 4 years old. If he faced external pressure, if he faced death again, that ruthless and cold temperament would burst out from the deepest part of his body without hesitation. It was the night when he climbed to the 2nd floor. It was the same when he met the horse gang in the wilderness. It was the same when he shot Prince Long Qing by the Daming Lake. It was always like this, and sometimes not. This was Ning Quebec unconsciously. He walked to the front of the Vermilion Bird. At this moment, the spring rain that had been planned for a long time finally fell. Chapter 3, Try to finish before 2:30. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. calm to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 421. The rain fell from the sky, and the pedestrians on the street took shelter. The tourists from other counties also reluctantly left. Only Ning Kai was left standing in front of the vermilion bird in silence. He opened the big black umbrella, and the raindrops fell on the tight surface of the umbrella, making a dull sound. He looked at the painting of the vermilion bird in front of the umbrella that was gradually drenched by the rain and thought of many things. There was no need to mention the past. Today, in the palace, the empress bowed in shock, and in the general's mansion, Su Shi was the general, which made him feel very troublesome. In particular, Su Shi's attitude made him very uncomfortable. This kind of discomfort was not anger, but a feeling of loss. Because he used to be a soldier of the Tang Empire, just like his comrades in the city of Wei, he regarded the #1 military man of the Tang Empire as his idol. When they were drinking and chatting, they would be in awe when the name of the Defender General of the state was mentioned. He remembered a certain saying about spiritual needs. He liked riding horses on the grassland with his comrades in the city of Wei and risking his life. He liked being respected and even feared by the people in Chang'an City. He liked his senior brothers and sisters at the back of the mountain of the academy. These were all wonderful spiritual needs. Therefore, he wanted to be a good person and be appreciated by a military official like Su Shi. He didn't want to be wary of him or even want to get rid of him. Unfortunately, things didn't always go as one wished. The spring rain was getting heavier and heavier. It was a mess, just like Ning Kai's mood at the moment. The solemn and elegant vermilion bird was drenched by the rain. That pair of majestic eyes seemed to be endowed with some kind of life and suddenly became lively. Ordinary people were completely unable to sense the changes in the vermilion bird portrait. Ning Kai clearly felt it. He looked at the eyes of the vermilion bird and felt the aura gradually condensing in the stone lines on the ground. He was very clear about what had happened. 2 years ago, when he first entered Chang'an City and stood in front of the vermilion bird with Sang Sang, he was scared stiff by the ancient murderous intent emitted by the painting. Later, he knew that the vermilion bird was a Taoist divine talisman. It could automatically sense the enemies invading Chang'an City and could exert a power close to that of a powerhouse at the peak of knowing destiny state. The enemy sensed by the vermilion bird was, of course, the big black umbrella in Ning Kai's hand. With Ning Kai's current cultivation state, it was naturally impossible for him to resist the aura of the vermilion bird. However, he stood in the spring rain with an unusually calm expression. It was not because of the big black umbrella in his hand. It was because he had a pestle in his arms. Ning Kai put his left hand into his bosom and held the array pestle wrapped in cloth. Looking at the vermilion bird painting in front of the umbrella, he said, "Now is not the same as before. Do you think I will still be scared out of my wits or become a quail in winter? I'm your master now. What can you do to me?" The owner of the divine talisman of Suzaku could not be self-proclaimed. It was passed down to him by Master Yen Sei, and then confirmed by the emperor of the Tang Empire and finally confirmed by the pestle. The vermilion bird painting in the rain sensed the familiar aura coming from under the black umbrella. A clear roar sounded in Ning Kai's sense of perception. It was sharp and high-pitched, mixed with some doubts, unwillingness, sadness, and indifference. The rain continued to wash it, and the ancient murderous aura in the vermilion bird painting gradually faded until it finally returned to silence, turning into an ordinary stone painting. Ning Kai knew that this meant that the vermilion bird had acknowledged his identity. The sorrow in the previous cry in the sea of consciousness was the vermilion bird's recollection of its master, Yen Sei. Ning Kai stood in the rain, holding the handle of the big black umbrella in his right hand and the array pestle of the god-stunning array in his left hand. Feeling the two different sensations, he understood something. The vermilion bird recognized its master in the spring rain, which represented the big array of Chang'an. From then on, it represented the safety of the Tang Empire and became his responsibility. He liked this land, this country, this peaceful and happy life, and he liked the people who lived here. Therefore, he was willing to take this responsibility. He was willing to use anything except his life to maintain the peace of the Tang Empire. But this did not mean that he would lose his life. Holding the array pestle in his left hand was holding the future of the Tang Empire. Holding the black umbrella in his right hand was holding his life. He had to hold both hands, and he had to hold both hands tightly. If there was a conflict between the two, like the lingering spring rain, then what he needed to do was to cut the spring rain in front of him with a knife like when he went to the old library, and smash all the conflicts and dissatisfaction like when the headmaster hit him on the balcony of the building of pines and cranes. On that night on the balcony of the building of pines and cranes, he once had such a conversation with the headmaster. The person I want to kill is very powerful, has a high position, and has a background that even I find difficult to deal with. You don't look like a person without a high position. Because my teacher is very great, so of course I am also great. Now, even compared with the tycoon I want to kill, our identities and statuses are similar. Then why are you still worried? If you want to kill, just find an opportunity to do so. My teacher seems to be very willing to let us students be unreasonable. But in fact, he is very stubborn and very reasonable. He always says that the law of the Tang Empire is the first, and the law of the Tang Empire is the first. How can he be unreasonable? What does being unreasonable have to do with the law of the Tang Empire? Can't I kill people if I don't use crooked ways? At that time, Ning Kai thought that the person he was talking to was an ordinary tycoon in Chang'an. Now that he thought that these words came from his teacher, they naturally took on a new meaning. Can't I kill people if I don't use crooked ways? Can't I kill Xiahou if I don't use crooked ways? Ning Kai smiled, put the big black umbrella back on his back, and rushed into the curtain of spring rain. He went to the house of red sleeves and met with Mistress Jian. He told her about his conversation with the Empress in the palace. Before he left, he took a detour to the bathhouse, where he had killed the censor, Zhang Yiqi. Then he went to the small courtyard by the lake in South City. Walking through the green bamboo forest, he found that the small courtyard had changed owners after he killed Yan Suqing, the tea master. He went to the blacksmith workshop in East City, and walked to the door of the backyard, silently imagining the scene of the old Chen Zixian falling under his knife. I used to kill you for no reason. Now my identity and status are different. If I stop for the stability and prosperity in the future, won't it be a waste for you to die? The rain gradually lightened, and Ning Kai was ready to go back to the old brush pen shop, but stopped at the entrance of Lin 47th Street. He turned to Chunxi Road and entered a tea house. Su Shi had already guessed the connection between him and those murder cases. He might even have connected those murder cases to the massacre of the general's mansion. Even if he had not connected this matter yet, he would definitely start to protect some people that he wanted to kill. Besides General Xiahou, there were still people alive on the oil paper list left by Darky. If Ning Kai wanted to kill them, he had to race against time with the imperial court. Sitting on the second floor of the tea house, looking at the pitter-patter of rain outside the railing, he carefully thought about the steps and began to prepare after making sure that he would not cause too much trouble. He asked for a pen and paper from the shopkeeper, and after thinking for a while, he began to write a letter hastily, and then sealed it, ready to send the letter to the academy by carriage. At this moment, he suddenly saw a familiar figure. That person also saw him, and said in surprise, Ning Kai, why are you here? Ning Kai said mockingly, Chu Yuxian, you did not go to the academy again today. Be careful that your old master finds out, and he will directly cut off your money. Ning Kai's current status was already very different from before, but Chu Yuxian was originally a generous and cheerful person, and had the usual mindset of the Tangs, not afraid of the rich and powerful. He came over happily and said, what's there to be afraid of? You can just write a section for me. Moreover, if you want to go to the House of Red Sleeves, with your current reputation, do you still need me to invite you? Of course, you should invite me. Chu Yuxian's eyes suddenly brightened, and he said, since you have nothing to do in the tea house, and you did not bring that little handmaiden with you, why don't we go to the House of Red Sleeves? Ning Kai shook his head and said, I have something to do today. Suddenly, he thought of something, and handed over the letter on the table, and asked, I have a letter to send to the back of the mountain of the academy, can I trouble you to go there? Chu Yuxian said bitterly, you know that I hate going to the academy the most. Ning Ke said, a section for writing. Zhongtong? Chu Yuxian said happily. Ning Ke laughed and scolded him, you wish. Chu Yuxian took the letter, and his eyes suddenly turned. Ning Ke obviously knew what he was thinking, and said, don't think about stealing this letter to sell, or I will not write the section, and I will go to your house to make trouble. It is just calligraphy appreciation, how can you say you stole it? Even if you stole it, how can you bear to sell it? Of course I will bring it home for my cultured father to be happy. Chu Yuxian was not embarrassed when Ning Ke saw through his thoughts, and he said with a smile. Ning Ke said seriously, this letter is very important, don't dare to delay my business. Chu Yuxian said, then I will go now. Oh yes, there will be a gathering of classroom 3 in a few days. I forgot the reason, but Jean Wuxia asked me to ask you if you want to go. If I have time, I will go. Ning Ke did not say anything definite. Chu Yuxian turned around and walked out of the tea house, and suddenly thought of something, and said, what are you going to do? Ning Ke said with a smile, I am going to kill someone, do you want to come and watch? Chu Yuxian felt bored, and he waved his hand and walked down the stairs. Ning Ke drank all the tea on the table, and stuck his head out of the window. He saw Chu Yuxian get on the horse carriage, and carefully calculated the time. He was not in a hurry to leave, and instead asked for a new pot of tea. He slowly drank it in the tea house. The spring rain was falling outside the tea house. The sky above Chang'an City was covered with rain clouds, and the sun could not be seen. Only the gradually dimming light showed that dusk was coming. Ning Ke took out a piece of silver, put it on the table, and left the tea house. Accompanied by the surprised and respectful farewell of the tea master, he walked towards the West City Gate. He did not joke with Chu Yuxian earlier. He was really going to kill someone. I am very happy to say that I can't take it anymore. There will definitely not be such a thing tomorrow. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 422. The dusk disappeared, and the drizzle came again. A middle-aged official with a thin face walked on the rainy street with an umbrella in his hand. Judging from the color of his official uniform, his rank was not low, but there were no attendants beside him. There was only a cold-looking general following him silently. The soldiers and lower-level officials at the West City Gate stood quietly under the eaves. Their eyes followed the footsteps of the two officials in the street. No one stepped forward, and no one showed a surprised expression. The middle-aged official was the city gate officer Huang Xing, who was responsible for the opening and closing of all the gates in Chang'an and the imperial city. The general following him was Yu Shuizhu, a deputy general of the city gate army. Huang Xing was known for his diligence and incorruptibility. Ever since he took over the position of the city gate officer, he would choose a city gate to patrol every morning and evening. Other than Yu Shuizhu, he did not bring any subordinate officials with him. He was light and unaccompanied, rain or shine, and there was not a day that he did not do this. The people at the city gates of Chang'an were already used to the scene in front of them. They could only leave after the two sirs finished patrolling. This had become an unwritten rule. According to the rules of the past years, the city gate officer Huang Xing patrolled the West City Gate today. After patrolling the West Gate, Huang Xing confirmed that there were no problems and nodded his head. General Yu Shuizhu turned his head to look at the nervous soldiers and officials under the eaves and waved his hand coldly. Everyone knew that today was finally over. With relaxed expressions, they dispersed and returned to their homes. Standing on the rainy street outside the government office of the West City Gate, Huang Xing tilted his umbrella and looked up at the drizzle. He felt his legs were a little tired and said bitterly, I'm old after all. Yu Shuizhu said, Your Excellency can still serve the imperial court for another 30 years. Huang Xing asked, You've accompanied me to patrol the city gates every day and returned home at night every day. My sister-in-law has long been dissatisfied. You've really worked hard. Yu Shuizhu replied after a moment of silence, My life is given by you, Your Excellency. Not to mention accompanying you to the 9 city gates of Cheng, and it's natural even if I die. Today, these 2 famous honest officials in Cheng and city used to be comrades in the military camp. Their fates had been changed by a tragedy and were now closely linked. If Huang Xing had not made up his mind to take Yu Shuizhu to princely Peiyan, he might have died along with that general. Even if he did not die, he would have been neglected by the imperial court. Without princely Peiyan's protection, he would not have had the hard work and honor of patrolling the gate of Cheng. Unfortunately, they were still affected by that incident in the past. Although the 2 of them were diligent and incorruptible, they had reached the end of their official and military positions. It would be difficult for them to be promoted any further, but at least they had glory, splendor, and wealth. Huang Xing looked at the city of Cheng and in the drizzle. After a long silence, he suddenly said with emotion, When we followed the general back to Cheng, we seemed to have entered the west gate. Yu Shuizhu's expression turned solemn. Every day, when the 2 of them patrolled the city gates at dawn and dusk, they talked about the affairs of the manors and the interesting matters of the court. They also reminisced about their military careers, but they never mentioned that general. That was because the 2 of them did not want to remember the tragedy and the role they played in it. Maybe it was because of guilt, or maybe it was because of fear. Yu Shuizhu did not understand why His Excellency would suddenly feel this way today. He said in a low voice, according to the imperial court's rules, they should have entered the city from the east gate. Later, this incident was used as evidence. Huang Xing sighed and did not speak again. The rain was getting heavier in the twilight. The pedestrians had already returned home. The subordinate officials of the city gate department had probably returned to their warm manners. The soldiers on night duty were hiding at the city gate or in the duty room. The wet street was empty and quiet. Only the sound of the rain accompanied the 2 of them as they silently recalled the past. 2 carriages were waiting silently at the 2 ends of the rainy street. They were sent by their manors. The stewards in the mansion had long been used to the rule of the adults and did not come to urge them. At this moment, footsteps suddenly sounded on the rainy street. The footsteps were very soft and stable. If one listened carefully, they could almost hear the subtle sound of boots stepping on puddles. It was a young man dressed in black with a black umbrella on his back. Strangely, the young man did not hold an umbrella. He let the rain fall on him. His clothes had long been soaked and the rain slid down a few strands of hair hanging down from his forehead. Huang Xing looked at the young man in black who was walking towards them and slowly raised his eyebrows. He only felt that the drenched young man in black was a little strange. He did not sense any dangerous aura and he did not think that anything would happen. That was because they were in Chang'an, a city with good security. They were at the heavily guarded West City Gate. Regardless of whether they were daring female soldiers or powerful cultivators, they would all become humble and calm in the face of the Tang Empire's majesty and powerful military power. Indeed, nothing happened. When the young man walked past the 2, he noticed the official robes Huang Xing wore and the light armor Yu Shuizhu wore. He bowed and then walked out of the long street. Huang Xing noticed that when the black-clothed young man bowed, the expression on his face was not one of reverence, but of very complicated emotions. He smiled and said, "We find it strange that this young man is drenched in the rain. Presumably, he will also find it strange when he sees us, 2 officials standing in the rain, silent." Yu Shuizhu said, "That makes sense. Then let's go back." Huang Xing suddenly felt that there seemed to be something in his hand. He looked down and saw that there was a piece of paper in his palm. He did not read what was written on the paper. Instead, he turned around and looked behind him. He saw that the young man in black had long disappeared from the street. Yu Shuizhu also noticed this. He suddenly raised his eyebrows and said in a low voice, "This person is amazing to be able to quietly put a piece of paper in the hands of your excellency." Huang Xing was silent for a moment and opened the piece of paper in his palm. The piece of paper was slightly yellow. It seemed very ordinary but also very unusual. The writing on it was probably written with cinnabar mixed with some kind of material. It was dark red like blood. There were some lines drawn on the top of the yellowish piece of paper. Those lines combined looked like a word, but neither Huang Xing nor Yu Shuizhu could recognize what it was. They could recognize the words at the bottom of the piece of paper because they were normal words. "I came from the general's mansion to take your lives." The expressions of the two changed dramatically. Their expressions were extremely gloomy, as if the night was about to rain. Huang Xing's fingers holding the piece of paper trembled slightly. The words, "General's Mansion," on the yellowish piece of paper evoked the deepest memories buried in their hearts. Those bloody memories had long been blurred. Today, Huang Xing suddenly sighed while looking at Cheng and city in the rain. It reminded them of something, and then this piece of paper brought all those memories back. The two were very clear that the general on the piece of paper referred not to the Defender General of the State Su Shi or the Defender General of the military Xia Ho, but Xianwei General Lin Guangyuan. Huang Xing sighed and said, "Just now I suddenly sighed." It was indeed a sign of something. Yu Shuizhu said solemnly, "I'll go to the prince's mansion." Huang Xing nodded. The two separated in the middle of the rainy street and walked to the horse carriage at the other end of the street with umbrellas in their hands. Their boots stepped on the puddles in the street, making splashing sounds. In the beginning, the rhythm of the sound was still very calm and steady. Then the footsteps on the rainy street became faster and more urgent. This proved that their true feelings at this time were not as relaxed as they seemed. Yu Shuizhu walked quickly with the umbrella in his hands. The expression on his face became colder and more serious. The fear in his heart was replaced by anger. He just wanted to quickly report to His Highness that there were indeed fish that had escaped the net. The footsteps suddenly became slightly messy. His left foot stepped into a puddle, and the splashing sound became longer and more dull. Because he could no longer lift his foot. His foot fell into the puddle. It was as if there was an invisible, sharp thread on the street floor, cutting through the pants on his leg, cutting through his flesh, cutting through his bones, causing his feet to fall off. It wasn't a single invisible sharp thread, but countless invisible sharp threads. Yu Shuizhu's knee broke in the middle, and then his whole thigh. Then the light armor on his body was cut into countless pieces. He was cut into countless pieces of fresh meat. Like ripe fruits, they fell from the sky one after another and smashed into the rainwater, making pitter-patter sounds. Huang Xing held an oil paper umbrella and rushed to the horse carriage at the end of the street in the rain. The oil paper umbrella in his hand was very old, and his face was very pale. He did not want to die. Although his oil paper umbrella was very old, and the whole Chang and city thought that he was very clean, in fact, he had taken a lot of money over the years. He wanted to live and enjoy everything that the money brought. Although it was hard to patrol the city gate every day, he actually enjoyed the fearful looks of his subordinates and the admiring looks of the people. He wanted to live and continue to enjoy all of this. He thought that he was a scenery in Chang and city, and he wanted to live for a long time. At this moment, he heard splashing sounds behind him. The splashing sound of heavy pieces of meat falling into the puddles was different from the splashing sound of official boots stepping into the puddles. It was very clear in the sound of the falling rain. Huang Xing did not look back. He did not dare to look back. His hand holding the oil paper umbrella began to tremble. Looking at the horse carriage not far away and the steward bowing respectfully by the side of the carriage, his pale face revealed a look of despair. The yellowish note in his hand had been soaked by the rain and sweat. Suddenly, a bright flame spurted out from his hand. Another wisp of flame spewed out from his official robe. Another wisp of flame shot out from the wrinkles on his face, which already showed that he was old. Countless flames spurted out from the deepest part of his body, instantly melting his hair, eyebrows, eyelashes, skin, fat, muscles, and bones, burning everything. The long street in the rainy night was dark and wet. The man under the umbrella was burning. After a moment, the oil paper umbrella fell from the sky and landed on the rainy street. Huang Xing, who was under the umbrella, had already turned into ashes without a sound. The umbrella slowly rolled in the puddles, its handle slightly scorched. In an alley not far away, Ning Ke stood quietly in the rain. He did not know whether it was because of the violent emotional fluctuations or the cold spring rain, but his face was a little pale and he looked a little tired. 1 chapter today, 3 chapters tomorrow. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 423. The number of chapters in the first few chapters are all wrong. Damn it. I'm sorry. My fingers were caught by the table and the chair. I'm stupid. It hurts. Wushang, continue to write. Try to finish the second chapter before midnight. In the alley in the rain, Ning Ke looked at his soaked black academy uniform and opened the big black umbrella. It would not be too difficult to kill the two of them, but it would be difficult to kill them before the imperial court, especially the military, realized what was going on and killed them silently. Huang Xing, who turned into ashes under the oil paper umbrella, was killed by his fire talisman. Yu Shuizhu was killed by Jing Fu. The Jing Fu was the most powerful divine talisman of Master Yen Sei. Before going to the wilderness, Master Yen Sei had passed this talisman to Ning Quebec. But because the talisman was abstruse, Ning Ke didn't really master the talisman's talisman until a few days ago when he broke out of the cliff cave. With the Great Spirit as the guide, the Jing Fu that Ning Ke successfully cast was more like a simulation. Of course, it was not a divine talisman, and it was far from the magical power of Master Yen Sei's Jing Fu. But it was very easy to silently cut a person into pieces in this spring rain. In the night, Ning Ke left the West City Gate with the umbrella. He went to the Imperial Palace first and found the deputy commander of the bodyguard, Su Chongshan. He handed over some things and then returned to Lin 47th Street. Sang Sang looked at him, who was wet all over, with a worried and confused expression on her face. Ning Ke explained in a low voice and went to the backyard to take a cold shower. Then he began to eat. Ning Ke sat at the table in front of the shop and looked at the funeral notes left by Sang Sang 2 years ago. He was silent for a long time and thought of Darky who died opposite the shop. It was also in spring, and it was also in the spring rain. Before Darky died, he left a list of those who had participated in the 2 tragedies. Now that Huang Xing and Yu Shuizhu were dead, the people on the list were all dead. But there were still 2 people who deserved to die. Zhuo'er didn't write their names on the list because he and Ning Ke both knew who they were. They didn't need to remember or forget. Princely Pei Yan of the Tang Empire and the Defender General Xia Ho. Sang Sang walked behind him and asked, "Will there be any trouble?" Ning Ke said, "Even if the old general can guess it, he can't do anything to me." Sang Sang was puzzled and asked, "Why are you in such a hurry?" In the past, when he killed Censor Zhang Yiqi or Chen Zixian, Ning Ke had to investigate for a long time. Only when he was sure that the imperial court did not notice the matter did he make a sound. Gate guard Huang Xing and Yu Shuizhu were important figures in the massacre of the general's mansion years ago. Ning Ke had been investigating them for a long time, but it still felt a little rash for him to choose to take action today. "Some people in the court have already guessed that I did it." Ning Ke handed the note on the table to Sang Sang and motioned her to keep it. He said, "If I don't do it today, I may not have the chance to do it in the future." Sang Sang took the letter and said, "If you still want to go to the general's mansion tomorrow, I will go with you." Ning Ke shook his head and said, "No, I have already sent a message to the academy. Someone will accompany me when the time comes." The next morning, before the stall of hot and sour sliced noodle soup was set up, several officials from the Tang military ministry had already come to the old brush pen shop and knocked on the door. Ning Ke was already prepared. He pushed the door open and walked out. He looked at the official he met yesterday on Vermilion Bird Avenue and said, "General wants to talk to me again?" The official's expression was much colder than yesterday. He said simply, "Please come in." Yesterday, he was defeated by Su Shi in the general's mansion, and then he killed 2 people after leaving the general's mansion. This was like a hard slap in the face of the Tang military ministry. Ning Ke was absolutely not surprised that General Su Shi would summon him again today. However, he did not expect that the place to talk today was not the general's mansion, but the Tang military ministry. Several horse carriages left Lin 47th Street and went straight north along Vermilion Bird Avenue. After passing Jianshan Archway, there was a very quiet and sparse forest, and the horse carriages turned into the forest. Ning Ke lifted the curtain and looked out. He could vaguely see a large flat meadow behind the dense forest, which looked like the scenery beyond the Great Wall. He could not help but feel a little surprised. The Tang Empire was founded on martial arts and fought in the north and south. The military ministry governed the 4 major border armies, the prefectural armies, and the Yulin Royal Guards. It was the most authoritative department in the empire, and in the hearts of foreigners, it was the most terrifying place in the world. This was the first time that Ning Ke came to the military ministry. He did not expect that there would be such a meadow and flat forest beside Vermilion Bird Avenue. It looked simple and plain, but in Chang'an, where land prices were rising day by day, it was in fact extremely luxurious. He also did not expect that the Tang military ministry did not have a strict atmosphere at all. There were no high walls, watchtowers, and quiet yamen, but only dozens of independent pavilions hidden in the green forest and meadow. The pavilions with black eaves and bright tiles were of different heights and seemed to be disorderly, but they were located in the grass forest in picturesque disorder. There were straight stone carriages connecting the pavilions, which looked quiet and elegant without losing the atmosphere. Several horse carriages sped on the stone road between the meadow and the dense forest at an extremely fast speed. The officials on the stone road heard the sound and all gave them strange and puzzled looks. The horse carriage stopped in front of the tallest wooden building in the depths of the green forest. Ning Ke walked out of the horse carriage and looked up. This wooden building had 3 floors, and there was a pavilion on the top floor. It had the same black eaves and black tiles, but the style of the eaves was different from the other buildings in the military ministry. The eaves were slightly curved like knives, and the red beams were straight like iron spears. A strong and direct aura seeped out of the pavilion. In the pavilion on the 3rd floor, the old man in court attire was leaning on the railing and looking into the distance. He looked indifferent, and no one knew what he was thinking. Yesterday's conversation was in the general's mansion, and the old man was wearing ordinary household clothes. That conversation was a private one. Today, however, they were in the military ministry of the Tang Empire, and the old man was wearing court attire. This conversation was no longer a private one, but a very serious and even dangerous one. Ning Ke walked into the wooden building and walked past the officers and officials who were busy sorting out files and military intelligence. He walked up the stairs and gradually came to the pavilion on the top floor. Yesterday's rain had swept away the ostentatiousness of late spring, and the air in the pavilion was unusually fresh. A cold wind blew into the pavilion and brushed against his face, making him feel refreshed. General Su Shi's slightly cold voice sounded along with the slightly cold spring breeze. "Do you know why there are pavilions without walls in the military ministry?" Ning Ke walked slowly to the railing and stood behind the old man. He shook his head and said, "I don't know." Su Shi turned around and looked at him. He said, "Because the mission of the Tang Empire's soldiers is to defend against the enemy outside our borders. If the enemy breaks into Chang'an and besieges the military ministry, then we will all take a knife to our throats and commit suicide. What's the point of fighting? If that's the case, why does the military ministry need walls? As for this pavilion, it's to tell all the Tang Empire's soldiers that they should have the bearing and vision to look at the world." Ning Ke said, "So there's such a deep meaning." Su Shi looked into his eyes and said coldly, "The Tang Empire is not afraid of external enemies, but internal strife. The strongest fortress must collapse from the inside. Ning Ke said, General, there's a deep meaning in your words. There's no deep meaning. What I said is very simple. Su Shi said coldly, the conversation with you yesterday was to warn you that the Tang Empire needs stability and can't have internal strife. You should focus on the overall situation and know how to respect the law. Ning Ke, you are a student of the second floor of the academy. I think you should be able to understand what I'm saying. Ning Ke said, General's teachings yesterday deeply shocked me. When I returned to the old brush pen shop last night, I asked the handmaiden to take out the law of the Tang Empire and read it by candlelight. Sure enough, I learned a lot. Seeing that he was still as tired as yesterday, the anger in Su Shi's heart gradually accumulated, but the expression on his old face became calmer and calmer. He asked a question lightly. He asked, yesterday at dusk, when Huang Xing in Yushuizhu died, where were you? Ning Ke frowned slightly as if he was recalling. After a moment, he answered, I was shopping. Su Shi asked, yesterday at dusk, it rained heavily. Which street were you shopping on? Ning Ke said, I like to be drenched in the rain. Su Shi asked, yesterday at the West City Gate, it was a talisman master who killed them. Ning Ke said, how daring. Su Shi looked at him and said expressionlessly, there are not many talisman masters in the world, especially the talisman masters in Cheng and City. The Imperial Center Administration has records of them. Ning Ke looked at him and said with a smile, then we have to ask the Imperial Center Administration to investigate quickly. Although the number of talisman masters is small, I think there are more than one or two. It may be more troublesome to investigate. Su Shi said, you are also a talisman master. Ning Ke answered, I do know a lot of things. It is reported that when the murder happened last night, a young man in black with a black umbrella on his back appeared at the West City Gate. Su Shi quietly looked at the black uniform of the academy on him. Ning Ke said, I also carried a big black umbrella on my back. Speaking of which, it seems that I went to the West City Gate at that time. Unfortunately, there are many young people who like to wear black. Su Shi said, but a young talisman master in black with a black umbrella on his back, who else in the world but you? Ning Ke looked at him and asked, General, are you suspecting that I killed those two officials? Su Shi said directly, yes, because you can't tell me where you were at that time. Ning Ke suddenly asked, General, are you interrogating a case? Su Shi said coldly, am I not qualified to do so? Ning Ke shook his head and said, if I were still a small soldier in the city of Wei, General would naturally be qualified to interrogate me. But after the preliminary examination of the academy, I have changed from military status to civilian status. Even if I am suspected, only the Cheng and local government can interrogate me. General, you are indeed not qualified to do so. Su Shi looked at him expressionlessly and said, according to His Majesty's decree, the Imperial Center Administration and the Military Ministry are both in charge of the Imperial Center Administration. Now you are a visiting professor of the Imperial Center Administration. Why can't I interrogate you? Ning Ke took out the waist token of a visiting professor of the Imperial Center Administration from his belt and gently put it on the railing beside the pavilion. He said, last night I went to the bodyguard office to ask. The day before yesterday, His Majesty had agreed to my request to withdraw from the Imperial Center Administration. But I still keep this waist token with me for the time being. Now I don't want this waist token, so General can't interrogate me. Su Shi did not expect that Ning Ke would do this in advance. He frowned deeply and then gradually relaxed his brows. With a mocking and shameless expression, he said, you really dare not let me interrogate you. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 424. A mocking and disdainful expression appeared on the face of the prestigious military leader of the Tang Empire. This slightly frivolous expression did not make Ning Ke feel that he was more like an ordinary person. Instead, he felt a heavy pressure. He replied slowly, "It's not that I don't dare to, but I don't want to." "General, you said that the military ministry has a pavilion without walls. I agree with you. The Tang Empire dominates the world and will not collapse no matter what happens in the outside world. I'm just worried that the disaster will come from within the city walls. If you insist on interrogating me, I'm afraid that the military is trying to suppress the academy in the eyes of outsiders." He said, "I know you don't mean that, but we can't send this wrong message to the enemies of the Tang Empire. So I don't want you to interrogate me, and you can't interrogate me either." Ning Quebec, the expression on Su Shi's face disappeared. He looked at Ning Ke and said coldly, "If you don't deny it and take responsibility, maybe I can praise you as a man." Ning Ke replied, "It's not bad if I can be a good poet." Su Shi said, "You're determined to challenge the military of the Tang Empire? What an arrogant madman. Do you really think you're qualified? Although I don't understand what you mean." Ning Ke paused and said, "I'm the core disciple of the headmaster of the academy. I represent the academy to enter the human realm and follow youngest uncle to travel the world. I really don't know what I'm not qualified to do." Su Shi stared at his eyes for a long time. Then he walked to the railing with his hands behind his back and looked down at Cheng and city outside the grass forest. He said, "You used to be a soldier, so you should know the duty of the Tang Empire's soldiers. So don't think that I don't dare to kill you." As he said this, a strong and indifferent aura exuded from the slightly bent body of the general, completely isolating him from the world around him. The fresh forest wind flowing through the pavilion suddenly stopped without a sound. The green trees outside the railings also stopped swaying. The superfluous leaves that had been blown off by the wind also stopped rolling among the grass. From Ning Ke's point of view, everything outside the attic's railing became motionless at this moment, like a landscape painting confined by a frame. He himself had become a part of the landscape painting. Only the old man by the railing, completely isolated from the landscape, was still free. The aura of heaven and earth in the pavilion had already been completely controlled by the old man by the railing. It was motionless and had lost all of its vitality. As long as he willed it, he could crush everything here. Looking at the back of the seemingly desolate and stooped old man who was actually extremely powerful and terrifying, Ning Ke was speechless. He thought to himself that the old man was indeed the most powerful person in the Tang military. This level of cultivation had actually faintly surpassed the limits of the peak of the martial Tao. Ning Ke was very clear that he had absolutely no way to fight against such a powerful state. As long as Su Shiwei moved his mind, the solidified qi of heaven and earth around him would instantly crush him into powder. Cold sweat gradually soaked the back of his clothes and the big black umbrella behind him. The expression on his face remained calm. In the landscape painting, only the old man by the railing was free. Fortunately, the old man seemed to want to hear what he had to say, so Ning Ke's mouth was free. "I entered the imperial city yesterday." Ning Ke looked at the back of the old man by the railing and said, "His Majesty took me to the small building." He knew that as the leader of the Tang military, Su Shi definitely knew what the small building in the imperial palace meant. As expected, the old man's court robe fluttered a little. He continued, "Before going to the general's mansion yesterday, I first went to the Vermilion Bird Avenue." Before he finished speaking, Su Shi asked, "The Vermilion Bird has recognized its master?" Ning Ke said, "Yes. So you should know that I am now responsible for the safety of Chang'an. If you really care about the Tang Empire and want to fulfill your duty as a Tang soldier, what you need to do now is to protect my safety, not to try to kill me." Su Shi stood by the railing and looked into the distance with his hands behind his back. After a long silence, he suddenly murmured with some regret and anger, "I did not expect to fall into your hands in the end." Ning Ke did not say anything. Su Shi turned around and looked at him expressionlessly. He said, "The reason why I investigated you is that I did not agree with His Majesty to hand over the array I pestle to you. To tell you the truth, Yen Sei and I have been friends for many years. But I think he has misjudged you, and so has the headmaster of academy. Ning Ke did not expect the military leader of the Tang Empire to have such a deep friendship with his master. He could not understand what had happened recently. He slightly raised his eyebrows and asked, "Why?" "Because you are not upright. Because you are heartless and cold-blooded. Because I am very clear that if the Tang Empire is really at a critical juncture, you will not live and die with this magnificent city." Su Shi looked at him and said word by word. Ning Ke fell silent again. He had to admit that Su Shi was right about him. Yesterday in front of the vermilion bird painting, he had been full of heroic spirit and silently vowed to protect Chang'an and the Tang Empire. However, before he truly vowed in his heart, he still put his life in the most important position. After a long silence, he raised his head and looked at Su Shi seriously. He said, "I can promise you that at least I will do my best." Su Shi said, "How can I trust you?" Ning Ke asked, "Why can't you trust me?" Su Shi said, "Because you are not trustworthy." Ning Ke asked back, "What kind of people are trustworthy?" Su Shi said, "Like your master Yen Sei. He seems to be playful, but he actually knows what is justice and what is reverence." Ning Ke shook his head and said, "My master is dead. Although you have been friends with him for decades, I don't think you know him well enough. My master has never been a person who upholds justice. He doesn't know reverence either. He only knows what is called responsibility. And I know that too." Su Shi said, "Your hands are stained with too much blood. You are not qualified to hold that pestle." Ning Ke said, "Yesterday in the general's mansion, you asked me where I was when Censor Zhang Yiqi died in the 14th year of Tianqi era. Where was I when the old blacksmith in the east of the city died? Where was I when Tea Master Yen Suqing died? Today in this attic, you asked me where I was when Huang and you died last night." Su Shi looked back at him coldly. Ning Ke asked calmly, "You have asked me many questions about where I was. I also want to ask, where were you when Xiahou massacred the villages in the Yan territory and burned hundreds of innocent people? Where were you when Xiahou buried 30,000 surrendered soldiers? Where were you when the Xianwei general's mansion was flooded with blood?" As he listened to these questions, Su Shi seemed to have aged a little in an instant. The atmosphere in the attic loosened a little, and the scenery outside the building came to life again. Ning Ke took 2 steps forward and came to Su Shi. He continued, "There is indeed a lot of blood on my hands. General, maybe there is no blood on your hands, but it doesn't mean that your hands are cleaner than mine. As you said, I am certainly not a good person. I never care about the ugly, bloody, and unfair things in the world as long as they have nothing to do with me. Maybe I am not qualified to hold that pestle, but there are not many people in the world who are qualified to question my right to hold that pestle. At least not you, General." Xiahou was able to stay out of it, and those generals and captains who massacred the villages were not punished. The imperial court said that there was no evidence and the case could not be investigated according to the law of the Tang Empire. In fact, you and I both know that it was only because Xiahou had made contributions to the Tang Empire and the northeast border military was useful to the empire. Ning Ke said, "Since the imperial court insists that the law of the Tang Empire comes first, then if you want to investigate my relationship with those murders, please find evidence first. Otherwise, please don't bother me in the future." Su Shi was silent for a long time. He looked at him and asked coldly, "Then can you tell me, did you do it for justice or for revenge?" "I am not a messenger of justice." Ning Ke said, "There is no hatred between me and General Xiahou. It is only because he offended me in the wilderness." Su Shi said, "Who can believe this?" Ning Ke said, "I don't need others to believe me. As long as the headmaster and His Majesty have no objections." Su Shi said, "Do you think His Majesty will always favor and trust you?" Ning Ke shook his head and said, "This has nothing to do with favor and trust. But I think even if His Majesty knew about this, he would probably think that I did the right thing." He suddenly felt that he had said enough today. So he turned around and walked to the stairs. However, at this moment, Su Shi suddenly sighed. You are very calm. I can imagine that you will become a very good person in the future, even better than Kuharan. Then you may also be more dangerous than him. Ning Ke heard the voice behind him and stopped. He thought of what His Majesty had said in the palace. Su Shi was undefeated on the battlefield, but he had suffered a great loss in the hands of youngest uncle. Did he really have to bear the consequences for his teacher? He turned around and looked at Su Shi, who was standing by the railing. He was finally annoyed. I respect you as the Defender General of the state. That's why I said so much to you with sincerity. If you really want to fall out with me and don't care about the law of the Tang Empire, then why did you say so much nonsense before? The law of the Tang Empire is not a fig leaf. It is the foundation of the Tang Empire. If you still think this way, then I can't let it continue like this. Su Shi looked at him and said calmly, as long as it doesn't violate the law of the Tang Empire, I have many ways to make you disappear. Ning Ke said, I am looking forward to it. Then he shook his head and said, don't lead some Buddhist and Taoist people to challenge me like the previous times. You should know that it is not very useful. Su Shi said, do you really think that no one dares to challenge you after Lu Yiqing lost to you? Ning Ke said, at least a big shot like you will not challenge me, because you can't afford to lose that face. At this moment, a voice sounded behind him. I can afford to lose that face. Ning Ke turned around and saw a slightly fat man at the entrance of the stairs. The man smiled and said, my name is Wang Jinglu. Ning Ke looked at Su Shi, who was standing by the railing, and shook his head. He said, it's a bit vulgar. My hand hurts and I am upset. The third chapter may be late. Please don't wait. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 425. Ning Ke was very satisfied with his performance in the pavilion. His words directly made Su Shi feel sad, and he was not in the mood to continue the interrogation. However, he did not expect such a situation to await him after his words. Looking at Wang Jinglu taking out the challenge certificate issued by the Imperial Center Administration, Ning Ke thought that this was really boring. As expected, they were going to fight again. It was really cliché. And if Su Shi was going to use the powerhouses in the military to directly beat him down, then with his prestige and status, why did he talk so much with him? Did Su Shi really expect to use words to move him to tears and make him deeply repent so that he would surrender to the military ministry and admit that he killed those people? This idea was also very cliché. However, no matter how cliché it was, Wang Jinglu was already standing in front of him with a very gentle expression and firm eyes. It was obvious that he wanted to fight. Ning Ke had never seen Wang Jinglu, but he had heard of him. Anyone who dared to call himself the first person below the knowing destiny state deserved to be vigilant. And he had heard a story from his master, Yen Sei. 2 years ago, on a rainy night in the Spring Breeze Pavilion, he killed people on the second Heng Street, and Wang Jinglu was waiting in the horse carriage in the middle of the street. They should have met, but they were separated by a divine Jing talisman. I have learned the Jing talisman. Ning Ke looked at Wang Jinglu and said happily, not like showing off, but like announcing good news. Wang Jinglu was not happy and said with a sad expression, I was kicked by His Majesty to the general, and it was said that it was also Master Yen Sei's idea. I am very grateful to him. Why do you use him to humiliate me? Ning Ke said, I am telling the truth. I don't want to humiliate you. Since there is some fate between us, why do we have to fight? Wang Jinglu held the paper in his hand and sighed, this is the first challenge certificate issued by the Imperial Center Administration in 10 years. Do you think it's possible not to fight? Ning Ke looked at Su Shi and said sarcastically, it's okay to push outsiders to challenge me, but now you want the powerhouses in the military to fight me. Did you forget that we are all Tangs? Su Shi looked at the scenery outside the fence and said nothing. Since he broke through the cliff cave, Ning Ke's cultivation state had rapidly improved to the upper see-through state. Otherwise, he would not be able to use such a powerful knife. However, the upper see-through state was still below the knowing destiny state. Facing Wang Jinglu, who was known to be invincible below the knowing destiny state, he did not have the confidence to defeat him. I don't accept the challenge. Ning Ke said, although the Academy seems to have the obligation to accept challenges after entering the human realm, you are a soldier of the Tang Empire. If this matter is spread out, both you and I will lose face. Wang Jinglu said, as I said, I can afford to lose face, so I can afford to lose face. In terms of shamelessness, you are no match for me. Ning Ke looked at him and said. Then, he walked to the edge of the pavilion and looked at the meadow and forest opposite. He shouted, have you finished that thing? As soon as he finished speaking, a young man who was much fatter than Wang Jinglu walked out from the depths of the forest. He rubbed his hands and moved his feet even slower than a girl from a wealthy family. It was obvious that he did not want to enter the building. Ning Ke shouted at him, if you don't come, I will be beaten to death. The young fatty was furious. He raised his head and shouted upstairs, aren't you afraid that I'll be beaten to death? Ning Ke glanced at Su Shi, who was standing by the railing not far away, and said, some people are too proud of their status to kill a fat man like you. The sound of footsteps rang out. Chin Pippi climbed up the stairs panting and walked into the pavilion. He first bowed respectfully to Su Shi, who was standing by the railing, and then looked at Wang Jinglu and said, you have to fight with me first. Wang Jinglu looked at Chin Pippi in front of him and thought of the finger attack he received in the Chang and local government on New Year's Day. His expression became more and more bitter, and he said helplessly, why is it you again? Ning Ke explained, in the whole second floor of the academy, I can only order him around. Wang Jinglu smiled bitterly and said, he is invincible below the knowing destiny state. After all, he is below the knowing destiny state. I am no match for Mr. 12. But before that, I would like to ask Mr. 13 for advice. Chin Pippi shook his head and took out a thick stack of papers from his arms. He licked his chubby fingers and took out the top one and handed it to Wang Jinglu. The challenge permission from the Imperial Center Administration. This permit was issued and stamped earlier than yours, Liao said. I have 62 permits issued by the Imperial Center Administration, and each one is earlier than yours. So even if you want to fight with Ning Ke, you have to finish these 62 rounds with me first. Wang Jinglu was stunned. He took the stack of papers and looked through them. Even though he was not afraid of anything and was still not afraid when he was knocked down by Chin Pippi in the Chang and local government that day, he was finally afraid. Failure was not terrible. But what if he lost 62 rounds in a row? At this time, Chin Pippi did not use the natural stream magical finger with the no-boundary spirit of the academy. But Wang Jinglu felt that he had been hit by the natural stream magical finger 62 times, and he had the urge to vomit blood. Ning Ke looked at the old man by the railing and said, I thought that you would not use such a vulgar method as a challenge to a duel. But in order to be safe, I still made some preparations in advance. According to the relevant provisions of the 4th chapter of the miscellaneous volume of the Law of the Tang Empire, any powerhouse in the army who wants to duel with me must first pass my 12th brother. If you don't want Wang Jinglu to vomit blood every day and eventually die as a scum, you'd better not try. Wang Jinglu's face became more and more gloomy. Chin Pippi walked to Su Shi and bowed respectfully again. He said, second brother asked me to bring you a message. The academy is strictly prohibited from interfering in the affairs of the imperial court, so the imperial court had better not interfere in the affairs of the academy. Su Shi had been silent since Chin Pippi appeared. As the number one person in the military of the Tang Empire, he naturally did not care about Chin Pippi. But he had to maintain a certain degree of respect for some people in the back of the mountain of the academy, such as that second brother. Help me bring a message to Mr. Second. Su Shi said, what if the people in the academy have already interfered in the affairs of the imperial court? Chin Pippi was silent for a moment and then said, second brother guessed that you would have this problem. He said that even so, the academy should take care of it. Of course, if you can find evidence of the people in the back of the mountain of the academy interfering in the affairs of the imperial court, then he will report it to the headmaster of the academy and discuss it with the imperial court. Walking down the pavilion, they walked between the small buildings of the military ministry on the meadow and in the forest. Chin Pipi suddenly said, General Su sure is a good man. Ning Ke looked at a big tree in front of the stone road and said, a hypocrite. Chin Pipi shook his head and said, no. Ning Ke said, he seems to be awe-inspiring and righteous, but in fact, he has mixed up a lot of mud. If he is not a hypocrite, then what is? Chin Pipi said, the headmaster of the academy once said that if one has a good heart and only makes some concessions for the general trend, then one can only say that one has lost his sharpness, but cannot be called a hypocrite. Ning Ke kicked a piece of gravel that was crushed by the carriage wheel and said, even the most kind and righteous person in the world is a bad person if he does not treat me well. Chin Pipi thought for a moment and said, it seems to make sense. Ning Ke suddenly sniffed and looked at him in confusion. He asked, why are you sweating so much? The clothes on Chin Pipi's back were already wet with sweat. He explained, fat people are afraid of heat. Ning Ke shook his head and did not accept this explanation. Chin Pipi said with shame and annoyance, your sweat has dried into salt flowers, and you still have the nerve to say that to me. Ning Ke said slowly like the eldest brother, I am just in the see-through state, and I am involved, so it is normal for me to be afraid. Senior brother, you are a grand cultivator in the knowing destiny state. This is embarrassing. Chin Pipi suddenly stopped and looked at him seriously. He said, do you know what kind of person Su Sure is? Ning Ke shook his head. Chin Pipi said, he is one of the most powerful figures in the world. Previously in the attic, if he wanted to, he could kill people like you and me on the street with just a wave of his hand. Ning Ke thought, why didn't I feel it? The most terrifying thing is his identity as the Defender General of the state. He holds the military power of the Tang Empire in his hands, and has countless powerhouses under his command. He has tens of thousands of cavalry, and can sweep thousands of miles. Chin Pipi said, you want me to fight with such a bigwig? Why should I not be afraid? Ning Ke said sarcastically, then why should I not be afraid? Because you are an idiot. Chin Pipi reprimanded him bluntly, even Lu Bai would be too afraid to eat or drink to fight with the entire Tang Empire's military, but you don't take it seriously. If you are not an idiot, then what are you? Ning Ke asked, what about youngest uncle back then? Chin Pipi said, youngest uncle faced the whole world back then. But what makes you think you can compete with youngest uncle? Ning Ke said, of course I am not as good as youngest uncle, but I am more shameless than him. Chin Pipi corrected him, you are more shameless. Ning Ke didn't bother to correct him. He suddenly thought of the conversation in the general's mansion yesterday, and asked seriously, are cultivators really no match for the army? Chin Pipi said, more or less. Ning Ke shook his head and said, but I don't believe it. Chin Pipi pointed at the wild geese that were like little black dots in the sky and said, if there are tens of thousands of sharp arrows flying towards you like wild geese, what will you do? Use the no-boundary spirit of the academy to change the direction of the wind? Or use the great spirit of righteousness to fight against it? No matter how you fight against it, you will die. Ning Ke said, with my cultivation, of course I can't. What about you? Chin Pipi sighed and said, if I can defeat the cavalry of the Tang Empire alone, I might as well change my name to headmaster of the academy. Ning Ke said, when you were scared by second brother into the forest, you waved your sleeves and ran more than 100 feet away. You were so light and graceful. I think the arrows of the army can't hurt you. Chin Pipi said proudly, of course I am graceful. Then his face turned bitter and he said, but you can't always be graceful. You can't eat being graceful. You have to stop to rest and meditate. How can you be graceful then? Ning Ke was silent. Chin Pipi asked, what are you thinking about? Ning Ke said, I am thinking whether you and second brother have violated the law of the Tang Empire. Chinpipi was a little nervous and asked, "Why are you thinking about this?" Ning Ke said, "If you and second brother have violated the law of the Tang Empire, I will report it to the officials and let Su Shi deal with you." Chinpipi said, "I don't care, but second brother is not afraid." Ning Ke said, "Su Shi said that even someone like second brother can be killed by his armored black cavalry." Chinpipi sighed and said, "I didn't expect that the Defender General of the state also likes to brag. Let me explain a few words to you. I have read many of the book reviews. They are well written and their thinking is much deeper and more wonderful than mine. But for the story of Jiang Yi, I have reported it at the beginning. There will be joys and sorrows, and it will have its own world structure. But it must be simple, and I want to write it interesting so that everyone can be relaxed and happy. So it will not be so complicated. My ability is limited, and I really can't think of too complicated and novel a story. That's all. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 426. Ning Ke asked, "What do you mean?" Chinpipi said, "Even if the armored cavalry is invincible, second brother has legs. Can't he run away?" Ning Ke said, "You just said that he can't run away. I'm me, and second brother is second brother." Chinpipi said, "He runs faster than me. I think even your big black horse can't catch up with him." Ning Ke suddenly thought of a question and said, "The problem is, if second brother is surrounded by the army, with his character, will he run away?" Chinpipi thought for a while and said, "Indeed, he won't." Ning Ke said regretfully, "It seems that no one can defeat 10,000 people." Chinpipi shook his head and said, "I think even if second brother is surrounded by 10,000 people, he won't run away. But he risked his life to kill 2,000 people, and the rest will naturally collapse." Ning Ke said, "That makes sense." Then he sighed and said, "Such a scene makes me feel hot. It's a pity that I won't have the chance to see it." They chatted along the way and walked out of the meadow and forest. They came to the side of Vermilion Bird Avenue and were about to part. Ning Ke cupped his hands and bowed to him. He said sincerely, "Thank you, senior brother." Chinpipi looked at him and sighed. Ning Ke was silent. Chinpipi suddenly asked, "Why?" Ning Ke knew what he was asking about. Why did he kill people? Why did he fight against the Tang army? Why did he seem to be hostile to the general who had not returned yet? He looked down at the grass in front of his feet and remained silent. He would not admit anything in front of General Su Shi. In front of the world, he would definitely say that he was as clean as a little white flower. But he did not want to hide it from Chinpipi. So he raised his head and looked into Chinpipi's eyes. He said calmly, "Xia Ho killed my whole family." Hearing this answer, Chinpipi was slightly shocked and his cheeks rippled. After a long silence, he reached out his chubby hand and patted his shoulder to comfort him. "Then you do have a reason to be angry. Xia Ho is not an ordinary person. There is no way for you to assassinate him. With your current level of cultivation, even if you think of something, you won't be able to assassinate him." Chinpipi looked at Ning Ke and said worriedly, "After all, he is a general of the Tang Empire and a visiting professor of West Hill. His status and influence are completely different. Even if the headmaster doesn't care about this matter, eldest brother definitely won't agree and second brother won't help you. I'm no match for Xiaoho." Ning Ke understood his words and was greatly moved. Finally, Chinpipi asked, "What do you plan to do when Xiaoho returns to Cheng and at the end of autumn?" Ning Ke shook his head and answered, "I don't know. Tang Imperial Palace." The palace, which had been washed by the rain for a day and a night, looked especially majestic and magnificent under the azure sky. Su Shi had been looking at this palace for decades. He was very familiar with it and was not tired of it. Just like his body now, although he was old and his old lung disease had not disappeared, he was still as tall and straight as when he first entered the military camp. He was still full of passion and attachment to the army. The emperor put down the bowl and frowned, seeming to dislike the bitterness. He waved his hand to signal the eunuch to leave and looked at the old general beside him. He said, "Although you and I both cough, our diseases are different. I can't give you this medicine. Speaking of which, I should let you rest in the south. Why do you insist on coming back?" Su Shi was very grateful for His Majesty's trust in him and even his meticulous care, but it didn't mean that he agreed with all of His Majesty's actions. He said, "The Nanxing mountain tribe submitted their surrender last spring. It's already peaceful there. We can just leave some troops outside the forest to suppress Yueluan Kingdom. Why should I stay there? Although the humidity there is good for lung disease, I'm really not used to that kind of sticky air." The emperor said, "Fine. If you want to go back to Chang'an, it's up to you. With you looking after the military ministry, I don't have to worry too much." Su Shi said, "But I have to ask Your Majesty to worry more about this matter." The emperor was silent. Su Shi said, "Your Majesty, please write a letter to the academy and ask the headmaster of the academy to punish Ning Quebec." The emperor turned to him and asked, "Do you have any evidence?" Su Shi said, "No." The emperor asked again, "What did you say when I wanted to punish Xiao?" Su Shi said, "I didn't say anything." The emperor said, "But my brother, the prime minister, the minister of the supreme judiciary, and even the empress said that it's written clearly in the law of the Tang Empire that it's not a crime without evidence." He looked at the most loyal old general of the Tang Empire and said in a self-mocking tone, "I thought about it for several nights and didn't object." "Neither did you. Are you going to object now?" Su Shi was silent for a long time and then said, "Even if it's not a crime without evidence, I still insist that it's a terrible mistake to hand over the god-stunning array to Ning Quebec. You and Yen Sei have been friends for many years." The emperor frowned slightly and said, "Why don't you trust his successor?" Su Shi didn't explain further and just said stubbornly, "I don't trust him to take over Chang'an." The emperor pondered for a moment and said, "I trust Ning Quebec." In the old brush pen shop in the early morning, Sang Sang got up early as usual, but she didn't chop firewood, boil water, and buy breakfast as usual. She looked at Ning Kei, who was sleeping soundly, and quietly pushed the door open. She walked to the front berth and squatted down to rummage in a deep drawer under the display shelf for a long time. Then she took out a neatly arranged package. The package was made of blue floral cloth. She just bought it yesterday. She didn't know what was inside, but judging from the way she held the package carefully, it should be very precious. She walked out of the old brush pen shop and boarded the horse carriage that she had arranged yesterday. She went to the House of Red Sleeves. As the most luxurious and romantic place in the world, the House of Red Sleeves was full of nobles. It was elegant and clean, but it was still a romantic place. It didn't close at midnight, so there was no reason to open the door early in the morning to welcome guests. Therefore, when Sang Sang got off the horse carriage with the package, both the front and side doors of the House of Red Sleeves were closed. The street was quiet and there was no one. Only the sound of sweeping could be heard from afar. Sang Sang looked around to make sure that no one noticed her. After the horse carriage left, she ran to the side door of the House of Red Sleeves. Before she knocked on the door, the corner of the door was opened and Xiao Cao's face appeared. The two maidservants looked very nervous, as if they were thieves. However, Xiao Cao didn't need to use any secret signals or exchange pleasantries. Xiao Cao welcomed her in. Dewdrop, who used to be the most popular girl in the brothel in Chang'an, had turned over a new leaf. Although the chicken soup calligraphy's copying business was not as good as before, she still had a great fortune. Moreover, someone on Lin 47th Street had already made an agreement with Mistress Jian for the sake of the dignity of his sect. Dewdrop still lived in the House of Red Sleeves. Every day, she would read, play the guqin, or play in Chang'an City. When she was free, she would teach the kabuki. She lived a happy life. She still slept late and woke up late. Usually, she would not get up until noon, which was no different from previous years. But today, before dawn, she got up from the bed and dressed herself with the help of the maidservant. Then she sat at the table with her hands on her cheeks, waiting for someone to come. The maidservant looked at her, suppressing her tiredness and yawning. She wondered what kind of important person she was waiting for. If Mistress Jian or the person on Lin 47th Street knew about it, there would be big trouble. The door was pushed open. Sang Sang walked in, but Xiao Qiao stayed outside. Dewdrop looked at the blue floral package in Sang Sang's arms. Her eyes suddenly brightened. She stood up and asked, "You are so bold. You even dare to come alone." Sang Sang put the package on the table and said, "If he really asks about its origin, you can tell him that I stole it." The sky was getting brighter. A small sedan with green curtain left the House of Red Sleeves and came to the lake in the south of the city. The lake was quiet, and there was a restaurant named Victory House. The name of the restaurant was written by the libationer himself. It was the most noble restaurant in Chang'an City. Opposite the restaurant, there was a house with black eaves and green tiles. It was quiet and beautiful. It was called Stone House, which specialized in selling antiques and calligraphy. It was said that it was owned by the same owner as Victory House. Compared to the Victory House, the Stone House was much less famous. Only a few people in Chang'an knew about it. However, all the rich nobles and tycoons knew that this humble house was the place where antiques, famous calligraphers, and painters gathered the most in the world. The small sedan didn't stop in front of Stone House. Instead, it was led into the inner yard by a steward respectfully. Dewdrop walked out of the sedan with the blue floral package in her arms. The boss of Stone House welcomed her in the yard in person. He was very gentle and polite. Being able to establish Victory House and Stone House, the boss was not an ordinary person. He had a powerful background. Although Dewdrop used to be a famous girl in Chang'an City, she knew that her status was far from the boss's. The only reason why she was treated so politely was because of the package in her arms. She didn't say anything more. She put the package in her arms on the table. The boss of Stone House looked at the blue floral cloth used in the package. He could tell that it was a cheap thing at first glance. He couldn't help but be stunned. How could there be someone in the world who used such coarse cloth to carry such precious things? Thinking of this, he became a little vigilant. However, thinking of the rubbings from the woman in front of him and the rumors in the calligraphy and painting industry, he finally decided to take a gamble. Dewdrop looked at the boss of Stone House in front of her and suppressed her nervousness. She said softly, 10 days. I'll wait for your good news in the House of Red Sleeves. The boss frowned slightly and said, Miss Dewdrop, you should be very clear that we have to bear a lot of responsibility for this kind of business. It's the servants, don't talk to me about the commission. Dewdrop smiled and said, I'm just an errand girl. There's no need for you to talk to me about this. Moreover, we all know what it means to Stone House if these things are sold to the world through your hands. Not to mention the commission, I really want to collect some money from you on behalf of that person. Hearing this, the boss knew that Dewdrop was a transparent person. He said with a smile, after the business is done, I will naturally reward Miss Dewdrop. What I said earlier was really unnecessary. Dewdrop sat in the small green curtained sedan and left. The boss dismissed all his subordinates, leaving only the old boss of Stone House, who was of good character and prestige. The old boss looked at the blue floral package and said with a slightly trembling voice, Is it really that person's authentic work? The boss said with emotion, If not for the guarantee, I wouldn't have to put up such a big show. The old boss thought of the few great appraisers in the calligraphy and painting industry in the side yard and thought that it was true. He looked at the blue floral package and sighed while stroking his beard. Sir Ning is such a distinguished person, but the little handmaiden in his house is so greedy. It's really sad. I even feel that it's not worth it for him. That's all for today. Tomorrow is a rest. Have a good weekend. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 427. Cultivators and ordinary people belong to two different worlds. Therefore, even with the knife at the side door of the academy, Ning Kei's status in the hearts of the Tang still mainly came from his status as a great calligrapher. In the hearts of professionals like the old shopkeeper, Sir Ning's status was even more prominent. Because of his respect and admiration for Ning Kei, the shopkeeper was very disdainful of the little handmaiden, even though he could only get the package with the blue flower cloth through the little handmaiden. In the old shopkeeper's eyes, the little handmaiden stole the master's property, which was really immoral. The shopkeeper thought for a moment. He disdained the little handmaiden's behavior and could not resist the temptation of money. He asked in a low voice, since the little handmaiden stole it, she would not dare to report it to the authorities or let Sir Ning know even if we took it. Why don't we, if you don't want to die, stop thinking about it? Hearing the shopkeeper's words, the boss of the stone house frowned slightly and warned sternly, don't talk about it in the future. I heard that the little handmaiden has a special status and has a good relationship with the princess. Also, from the house of red sleeves, Sir Ning treats the handmaiden differently. Even if she was taken in by Sir Ning, the little handmaiden is just a greedy girl. She is not worthy of someone like Sir Ning. The shopkeeper suddenly thought of something and said, Boss, Sir Ning is not an ordinary calligrapher. Will there be any problems if we sell them secretly? The shopkeeper said, the little handmaiden is very favored and Sir Ning's seals are all kept by her. We have already obtained the sales documents, so these are not stolen goods. Even if Sir Ning finds out about this in the future, he can only blame the little handmaiden. According to the law of the Tang Empire, we are not responsible. The shopkeeper praised, Boss, your way of doing things is really reassuring. The shopkeeper picked up the blue flower cloth package and asked, Are they all in the side yard? The shopkeeper nodded. The west yard of the stone house was hidden behind the main 3-story building and under the 9-turn green tree. The lake breeze was gentle and quiet here. Several men walked out of the room and greeted. Among these men, some were from the Song Kingdom, some from the South Jin Kingdom, and some from Yangguan of the Tang Empire. One of them was a master craftsman from the auspicious ink shop in Chang'an. They were all the leading figures in the appraisal of calligraphy and paintings in their respective countries. Yes, no matter whether they were gray-haired or indifferent, they all looked proud and confident. Brother Mo, sure, you actually came too? Brother Jifu. Who's that silent man under the grape trellis? He looks familiar. I think I met him once in the Yu Kingdom's imperial palace the year before last. As they exchanged their identities, the pride and confidence in these people's eyes gradually turned into astonishment. This was because they discovered that the reputation and status of the other people in the courtyard were not inferior to their own in the industry. Many of them had been famous for a long time, but they had never seen them before. They did not expect that they would all meet in this small courtyard today. Brother Mo sure stroked his beard and said emotionally, Stone House has been doing well these past few years. They managed to invite so many of us over in such a short time. The old man called Brother Jiefu shook his head and said emotionally, if not for the fact that the items being sold this time are too rare and precious, you and I would not have gathered here. When the details of the sale were mentioned, the few men, including the silent man under the grape trellis, stood closer. They lowered their voices and began to discuss. At the same time, they wanted to see how much the other party knew about this matter. How many scrolls are there in existence today? No one knows the exact number. We only know that the imperial study in the imperial palace has the most. I heard that His Majesty took more than half of them from the old brush pen shop. Brother Mo sure said bitterly, they are hidden in the dark imperial study. No one can see them, appreciate them, or see them. The people cannot get close to them. This is really, he wanted to criticize the Tang Emperor for going against the grain. However, even though Chang'an's politics were clear, he did not dare to say it. The manners of the Chancellor and Grand Secretary Wang each have a few copies. The other manors should have about 4 more. However, these old men have hidden them in their manners. They are even more secretive than His Majesty. They don't show them to others easily. There are many rubbings of the chicken soup calligraphy, but no one has seen the original. It is rumored that it is in Grand Secretary Wang's mansion. Before everyone became famous, some lucky people bought some authentic works at Lin 47th Street. They were sold for a very high price in the past year. Most of them disappeared after changing hands twice. There are about 12 scrolls in total. I wonder how many scrolls the stone house got this time. Is there a central section? A central section? Not even a wide one. If it is a calligraphy section, it must be more than 3. Otherwise, the owner of the stone house would not have spent so much money to invite all of us here. The calligraphy appraisers discussed heatedly. Just then, the courtyard door was pushed open. The boss of the stone house walked in with a blue floral cloth package. The crowd followed the boss back to the flower hall. Their eyes never left the blue floral cloth package in his hand. They were puzzled, but also full of anticipation. The boss gently placed the blue floral cloth package on the table. He stretched out his hand and gestured for them to enter. The old shopkeeper brought 2 of his trusted subordinates with water and towels. The calligraphy and painting appraisers immediately surrounded him. With the fastest speed and the most meticulous attitude, they washed their hands clean and dried them with towels. Then, they took the oil-absorbent tissue paper that the shopkeeper handed over and carefully soaked up the remaining water and oil on their fingers. Then, they gathered around the blue pattern package. The middle-aged man called Brother Mo Sher rolled up his sleeves and raised his hands. He looked at the coarse blue floral cloth package and said unhappily, "When did the stone house become so shabby? Wrapping it in a cloth, not to mention the fact that it would harm the calligraphy section inside, just the smell alone would be extremely foul." The boss of the stone house could not afford to offend such a professional who had spent his life appreciating books. However, the professional habits they had developed made them unable to tolerate the scene in front of them. The boss of the stone house smiled bitterly and did not explain. He reached out to untie the blue floral cloth package, revealing a slightly flat square box inside. The box was also made of coarse cardboard. Brother Mo Sher became even more displeased. He reached out to open the box, and then his body froze beside the table. The entire reception hall became silent. The appraisers looked at the paper in the box and were shocked speechless. They felt their eyes blur. After a moment, someone exclaimed in disbelief, 7 pieces. The boss walked to the side and sat down. He picked up his teacup and took a sip. He smiled and said, "Take a look first." The appraisers gathered around the table and carefully took out the calligraphy sections from the box. They were all the best in the industry. It did not take long for them to confirm that the 7 sections in the box were all authentic. Even though there were some doubts about the date of the sections, everyone thought that they were newly written. However, this did not affect the value of the sections. Thus, the appraisers were very shocked. They had not expected the stone house to spend so much. It could even be said that other than the imperial study of the Tang Imperial Palace, there was no other place where one could see so many authentic pieces of calligraphy. What shocked them the most was the section at the bottom of the box. To them, it was a crumpled piece of paper. But in their eyes, that piece of paper was even more valuable than the legendary Shishan Su. Because there was the word chicken soup on the paper. Even though it should be authentic, but everyone knows that the original copy of the chicken soup calligraphy was bought by Grand Secretary Wang for 4,000 liang of silver. It is now hidden in the scholar's mansion. Brother Mo Sher frowned and said, "Is this a new copy?" The people around the table frowned and thought that there was indeed something wrong with this. Brother Mo Sher carefully pinched the 2 corners of the paper and held it up to the sunlight outside the reception hall. He wanted to see what was wrong with it. An appraiser from the kingdom of Song standing opposite him suddenly exclaimed and pointed at the paper. He said, "There are words." Everyone looked at the back of the paper. There was indeed a line of beautiful small words. This is real. Who wrote this? The appraiser from the Kingdom of Song was confused and even angry. Even if this chicken soup calligraphy is a new copy, it is still an extremely valuable work. How can someone write on the back so casually? Brother Mo shook his head and looked at the small words. He said emotionally, other than Sir Ning, who else can write such good words? If it was written by him, not only would it not ruin its value, but it would add color. Is this the original copy of the chicken soup calligraphy? With Sir Ning's signature, it is naturally the original copy. Then the one that Grand Secretary Wang bought at a high price? The one from Grand Secretary Wang's house is naturally fake. Everyone was silent. Even though they were not cultivators, they had all heard of the legendary story of the chicken soup calligraphy. Especially as the rubbings of the chicken soup calligraphy spread throughout the world, many people thought that in terms of value, the chicken soup calligraphy was almost as valuable as the blooming flowers calligraphy in the imperial study. Someone murmured in shock, how much should this be worth? Back then, Sir Wang bought it for 4,000 taels of silver. It was said to be a friendship fake, and at that time, Sir Wang's reputation was just beginning. The man who had been silent under the grape trellis in the courtyard and was still silent after entering the reception hall suddenly said, "Give it some time to advertise." It is best to anger Grand Secretary Wang's residence. The man raised his head and looked at the owner of the stone house and the appraisers. He said, 30,000. I sold this chicken soup calligraphy. If it is less than 30,000, I will be too ashamed to face anyone. As he said this, the silent man no longer looked dull. He looked extremely confident and proud, as if he had pulled out a cold sharp blade from a rusty scabbard. Everyone finally recognized who this silent man was. This man was the most famous seller in the calligraphy and painting industry. Very good. The owner of the stone house stood up and suddenly remembered Dewdrop's words. After thinking for a moment, he looked at the seller and said, "But there is a rule that needs to be written. Sir Ning has the right to choose the buyer." The man frowned slightly because he had rarely heard of such a request. The owner did not explain too much. The reason why he did this was because the origins of the 7 calligraphy sections were somewhat dishonorable. Even though the stone house did not have to bear any responsibility according to the law of the Tang Empire, if this matter were to be exposed, the stone house had to be prepared for the calligraphy sections to be taken back. Writing such a rule in advance was firstly to give Sir Ning face. Secondly, the sale was invalid, and it was also to appease the big shots who were qualified to buy the calligraphy sections. I don't know why I feel so uncomfortable. Maybe it's because of my laziness. I'll only write 1 chapter today and 3 chapters tomorrow. If I don't pressure myself, I'm useless. Damn. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 428. The kitchen of the old brush pen shop was filled with the fragrance of vegetables. Ning Ke stood behind Sang Sang and finally couldn't help asking, "Does anyone suspect that I sold them myself?" Sang Sang didn't turn around and said, "I heard that they all thought I sold them secretly. I'm really sorry to let you bear the reputation of being a thief." Ning Ke said shamefully. Sang Sang glanced at the green tofu pudding in the pot and closed the stove with her little foot. She put the tofu pudding into the bowl and said, "Young master, it's okay as long as it can be sold for a good price." Ning Ke took over the increasingly heavy bowl and said, "I hope so." Recently, there was a secret rumor in the calligraphy and antique shop in Chang, and that 7 sections of calligraphy from the old brush pen shop were going to be sold. It was said that these 7 sections were from a greedy handmaiden. Of course, that was not the truth. 6 out of the 7 sections were written by Ning Ke on a certain night, and he was the one who wanted to sell them. The reason why he took such a roundabout way to involve Dewdrop and even let Sang Sang bear the reputation of a greedy seller was mainly because of 3 reasons. First, Ning Ke didn't want anyone to know that he needed a large sum of money now because he didn't want others to know what he was going to do with the money. Second, as a first-class or even super-class calligrapher, selling his own works was a very shameful thing no matter how one looked at it. The third point was the most important. If he wanted to sell his calligraphy sections in public, the emperor and the palace would definitely borrow them or buy them at the official price, even though his words were gentle and he was shameless. The emperor had never returned the sections borrowed from the old brush pen shop. As for the official price, it couldn't meet Ning Ke's current needs. That was why he came up with this idea. Sang Sang cut some pickled mustard and used chopsticks to put it on the green tofu pudding. She asked, "Do you want sesame oil?" Ning Ke shook his head and said, "The corners of my mouth are burning. I'd better eat something light." Sang Sang used her slender fingertips to pick up a small handful of sesame seeds and sprinkled them evenly into the tofu pudding. She asked, "Yesterday I did the calculation with Mr. Chi again. The amount of money is still not enough. Will the 7 sections be less? No matter how precious an item is, if too much of it is released at once, its price will drop. Just like Chenjinji Cosmetic Store's cosmetics, if it was everywhere on the streets, why would it be so expensive?" Ning Ke said, "I was worried that if I put all 7 sections on the market at once, it would ruin the market price. Now it seems that the stone house is indeed capable." Holding the tofu pudding bowl, Sang Sang's eyes glowed as she said, "I wonder how much this can be sold for." Ning Ke said, "The first 6 sections can be sold at least 8 or 10,000 yuan, right? The most important thing is that last chicken soup calligraphy. I don't know how much it will sell for." Sang Sang asked doubtfully, "Is that chicken soup calligraphy the original?" Ning Ke nodded and looked at the array pestle that was placed in an inconspicuous corner of the display rack. He said, "The chicken soup calligraphy has always been wrapped on the pestle that my master asked you to pass to me." Then he sighed and said, "My master is an old liar. I am very touched." This sentence was both a tease and a sigh. It was mostly because of his conversation with General Su Shi a few days ago. Su Shi insisted that Master Yen Sei was a righteous person. Now that it was proven that his late master was indeed a troublemaker, Ning Ke could not help but feel gratified. Sang Sang said worriedly, "I'm just worried that old scholar Wang will be angry." Ning Ke laughed and said, "He wants to buy the chicken soup calligraphy from my master with 4,000 taels of silver. Who else would my master lie to if not Lord Wang?" Sang Sang said, "But a lie is still a lie." Ning Ke thought for a moment and asked, "Have you found out?" Sang Sang said, "Old scholar Wang was originally from Qing. In Chuan County, the clan has been planning to rebuild the ancestral temple and the genealogy. The Grand Secretary's mansion has been leading this matter and has been preparing for a few days." After eating the vegetable and bean curd porridge, Ning Ke rubbed his stomach and got on the horse carriage to the Grand Secretary's mansion. It was not Xingjing, the Grand Secretary of the Imperial Library, who lived in the Grand Secretary's mansion, but Wang Shichen, the Grand Secretary of 3 dynasties. Grand Secretary Wang Shichen's seniority and prestige were not comparable to that of Grand Secretary Zheng. Compared to him, his temper was also much worse than that of Xingjing. In the quiet study, old scholar Wang looked at Ning Ke in front of him. His slightly turbid eyes were spitting flames of anger. He did not care about Ning Ke's identity as a student of the 2nd floor of the academy at all. He shouted harshly, "When you were in my mansion, you stamped the chicken soup calligraphy in front of everyone. Why is there another chicken soup calligraphy now? I don't care whether it was your handmaiden who stole it or not. I just want to know why there is another chicken soup calligraphy." Ning Ke suddenly regretted it. After a long silence, he said with a bitter smile, "I did not know about this before I got the relic of my late master. I was drunk when I wrote the note in the House of Red Sleeves that night, so I did not recognize that it was a copy of my late master's in the Grand Secretary's mansion. I really did not expect him to have such an elegant hobby." "Elegant hobby? How is that elegant hobby?" Wang Shichen's white hair fluttered in the wind. He was so angry that he could not vent his anger. He waved his trembling hands and roared angrily. That day when I went to the Southern Gate Temple to stop him, he took out the chicken soup calligraphy from his sleeves. How is this elegant hobby? He was obviously prepared to cheat me of my money in advance. Ning Ke smiled and corrected him. My late master must have never thought that you would be the one to be cheated. Then he said seriously, since that chicken soup calligraphy is a copy of my master's, it is naturally very precious. Moreover, he has already passed away, so please do not blame him anymore. Grand Secretary Wang sneered and did not reply. Ning Ke suddenly asked, I heard that your family is rebuilding the ancestral hall. Grand Secretary Wang's expression changed slightly and he nodded. With your prestige, the horizontal board of the ancestral hall will naturally be inscribed by His Majesty. However, do you still need someone to write the inscription tablet and the genealogy? Ning Ke asked. Grand Secretary Wang was startled and then he understood Ning Ke's meaning. He could not help but be overjoyed. Although the chicken soup calligraphy was precious, for a large family that inherited poetry and books, the ancestral hall and the genealogy were related to the inheritance of the family. It was something to be passed on to the future generations. It would be wonderful if Ning Ke could inscribe it himself. Thank you very much. Then I will not stand on ceremony. Grand Secretary Wang laughed and then he changed the topic and asked, since the calligraphy was taken by Miss Sangsang to sell, are you going to take it back the day after tomorrow? As an elder statesman of the Tang Empire for 3 dynasties, he naturally knew the news that Xingjing had reunited with his daughter. Therefore, the Grand Secretary was angry about the 7 calligraphy of the old brush pen shop and had always had a deep doubt. At this time, he asked in front of Ning Quebec. Ning Ke smiled and did not answer. Grand Secretary Wang understood what he meant and said with a serious expression, if that is the case, then I will go and buy the chicken soup calligraphy back. Will Sir Ning mind? With a bigwig like Grand Secretary Wang entering the auction, the 7 calligraphy sections would definitely be sold at a very good price. Ning Ke only had money in his eyes and did not mind at all. He immediately smiled. Chu Yuxian got off the horse carriage and looked at the people walking towards the stone house. His expression changed slightly and he said with a trembling voice, my father is indeed rich, but there are many people richer than him in Chang'an. Those people are royal merchants from the South City. Are you expecting me to compete with them? Chu Yuxian's father was Master Chu, one of the 7 aristocrats in the eastern city. He was a famous wealthy merchant in Chang'an and was famous for being cultured. Therefore, the stone house had sent an invitation to Master Chu for the 7 calligraphy of the old brush pen shop. This invitation was naturally kept in Chu Yuxian's sleeve. Ning Ke had followed Chu Yuxian to the stone house. He was not too interested in the auction of his own calligraphy sections, but to ensure that there would be no problems and that he would be able to get the money, he had decided to come personally. Chu Yuxian looked at Ning Ke beside him with a worried expression. After his father had received the invitation, he had started to ask around about today's events and vaguely knew that the old brush pen shop had been robbed. Since they were selling stolen goods from the old brush pen shop today, Ning Ke had insisted on coming to take a look. It could only be that he wanted to cause trouble or buy it back with money. But no matter what, it sounded a little dangerous. I'm not here to cause trouble. Ning Ke explained, I'm afraid that someone will cause trouble. Chu Yuxian did not understand his words. He thought of his father's ecstasy when he found out about his relationship with Ning Quebec. He did not care about what would happen next and walked towards the stone house. After showing the invitation, a pretty maid led the 2 into the courtyard. The stone house was located by the quiet lake. The warm lake breeze of late spring passed through the willows by the lake and through the quiet corridors and halls. When they entered the courtyard, it was already much cooler. The auction was held in a 3-story wooden building. The building was divided into 3 sides, and only the side facing the lake had no buildings. It was wide and open, and there was a platform in the middle of the building. There was nothing on the platform except for a large, elegant screen. A calligraphy section was embroidered on the screen with golden thread, but it was hard to tell who it was from a distance. The clear lake breeze blew in from outside the building, gently brushing against the screen and slowly passing through the pavilions. The heat that had just arisen disappeared immediately. In the gentle breeze, the extremely simple layout would make even the most vulgar person feel a sense of elegance at a glance. There were more than 20 individual pavilions on the third floor. The entrances of the pavilions were partitioned by gauze bamboo. When the lake breeze blew, the gauze fluttered, revealing the bamboo bone curtains at the back. One could vaguely see the feet, but it was impossible to see what kind of person was sitting inside. It not only made the people in the pavilions feel comfortable, but also protected their privacy. Ning Ke and Chu Yuxian were led by the pretty maid to a pavilion on the second floor. They sat down and looked at the clear screen on the platform in the building. They thought to themselves that they had made the right choice in choosing the stone house. There was too little time between receiving the 7 calligraphy pieces from the old brush pen shop, starting the publicity, and today's official auction. There was not enough time to spread the news to the South Jin Kingdom and the other countries. Those foreign merchants also did not have the time to attend the event. The boss of the stone house could not help but feel a little regretful. He thought to himself that he should not have asked the appraiser to come over when he first received the news from the old brush pen shop. He should have just spread the news. However, the 7 calligraphy pieces from the old brush pen shop, especially the chicken soup calligraphy, was too attractive. Even though the merchants from the South Jin Kingdom and the other countries did not have the time to attend the event, the envoys from the other countries and 2 or 3 royal merchants who lived in Cheng and all year round came. From their expressions, it seemed that they were really interested. There were countless whispers in the pavilion of the stone house. No one doubted the credibility of the stone house, and naturally no one doubted the authenticity of the 7 calligraphy pieces. These buzzing discussions were probably about whether or not to bid and to analyze the strength of the competitors. As a middle-aged man in a simple green robe walked up to the platform, the discussions in the stone house gradually subsided. When the middle-aged man gently tapped the golden chime tablet in his hand, it became even more quiet. "This is the boss of the stone house?" Ning Ke asked. Chu Yuxian shook his head and pointed at the man downstairs with his folding fan. He said, "This person's surname is Zhong and his given name is Li. It is said that he is from a branch of the Zhong family in Yangguan. He had some problems with his family and was unable to become an official for many years. That was why he left Yangguan in anger and started this business. He has been working in the auction house of the Kingdom of Song all these years. Many people think that he is the best seller. Since the stone house has made such a big event today, we naturally have to invite him." When Ning Ke heard the Zhong family in Yangguan, he naturally thought of Zhong Dejun. He could not help but laugh. He said, "I hope this person is not as boring as Zhong Dejun." Chu Yuxian laughed. Not everyone from the Zhong family in Yangguan is useless. Zhongli stood on the platform and calmly looked around at the 3 pavilions around him. Even though it was a simple glance, the people in the pavilions felt that he was looking at them. Just this move alone was enough to show the skills of a seller. Then, contrary to everyone's expectations, the seller did not introduce the history of the stone house like normal auctions, nor did he greet the bigwigs in the pavilions. Instead, he spoke directly. His voice was calm and his expression was neither servile nor overbearing. There was even a hint of pride in his voice. "Today is the 84th day of spring. It is the time for the golden jade nectar to hit the market. Everyone says that gold is common and jade is pure. However, jade is also common today. Today, I invite all of you to admire the most elegant item in the world, the beauty of 1,000 years of ink fragrance." Zhongli smiled and said, "You may be a little disappointed. Today's event does not have a prelude, nor will there be any other famous calligraphy sections. Just as gold is a common object before jade, what other calligraphy sections in the world are not common objects before the 7 sections of the old brush pen shop?" Hearing this, the nobles and businessmen in the pavilions of the stone house gasped in shock. This was because the 7 sections from the old brush pen shop were too highly praised. However, after thinking about it carefully, the people in the pavilions had to admit that even though this was a move by the stone house to raise its own status, they could not be faulted. This was because in today's world, not to mention the calligraphy masters of the past, even the works of the old masters and the works of the master of calligraphy could not compare to the glory of the old brush pen shop. As Chu Yuxian listened to the discussions and praises in the pavilion, his eyes brightened and his expression became more and more proud. He gently fanned himself and stole glances at Ning Ke from time to time. He thought to himself, if you know that the owner of the old brush pen shop is sitting right next to me, won't you die of jealousy? Damn it. Even Chuan County is prohibited. Chapter 2 will definitely be out before 11 o'clock. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 429. Chu Yuxian waved his fan proudly and felt honored. The people in the attic of the stone house were also sighing in admiration, especially the Tangs, who also felt honored. Some said that there had never been such a young calligrapher in the world. Some said that Mr. Ning was the best calligrapher in the past 1,000 years. Some said that the flower-blooming calligraphy was the best semi-cursive calligraphy, and some said that the chicken soup calligraphy was the best cursive calligraphy. Hearing these comments, Ning Ke felt uncomfortable all over. He was indeed a thick-skinned person, and he had always been very confident in his calligraphy. However, calligraphy was his true love, and he knew that he was not worthy of such an exaggerated evaluation, so he could not help but feel a little uneasy. He knew that his calligraphy was good, and could even be said to be very good. In today's world, it was definitely top-notch. However, if it was not for the coincidence that the young man had written, "Flower blooming on the shore," in the imperial study, and the emperor's fanatical love, and then Master Yen Sei and the academy, even if his calligraphy was praised by the calligraphers, he would not have the status he had today. He thought back to the days when the old brush pen shop's calligraphy hung on the wall of Chang, and city was met with disdain during the spring rain. There were no customers for several days, and only Chao Xiaoshu stood outside the door with an umbrella, smiling. He knew very well that the so-called reputation was mostly attached, like the makeup on a woman's face. However, no matter how clear-headed Ning Ke was and how calm he was after his self-reflection, the officials and nobles in the attic of the stone house could no longer remain clear-headed and calm after hearing Zhong Li's simple words. The seemingly simple calligraphy sections were carefully sent to the stage by the most popular courtesan after Lu Shui from the House of Red Sleeves. Then, after rounds of intense bidding, they found new owners. Hearing the increasing amount of money, Ning Ke quickly calculated how much he could get. He realized that as long as he did not lose the chicken soup calligraphy, he should be able to satisfy his needs. He could not help but smile, and looked forward to Lord Wang spending a lot of money later. As long as his reputation could earn him money, he could not be bothered with how fake his reputation was. The so-called shame and uneasiness disappeared in an instant. Chu Yuxian secretly glanced at his expression and felt that his smile was a little strange. He could not help but shiver and asked in a low voice, "What are you going to do? Which one do you want to buy? Chicken soup calligraphy?" He steeled his heart and said with a trembling voice, "I brought 50,000 taels of silver today." Ning Ke was shocked. He looked at him and asked, 50,000 taels of silver? What are you going to do with so much silver? Chu Yuxian said, "Father gave it to me." Ning Ke was even more surprised and said, "Your father is really going to buy it? Don't, I'll just write a few paintings for him, and he'll just give me a few thousand taels of silver." Chu Yuxian thought that he was being polite and said with a bitter face, "I only found out later that my family had sold half of their property so that I could enter the academy. Now I really don't have any more money." Ning Ke said angrily, "How can a calligraphy section be sold for 100,000 taels of silver in the world? No matter how good the ink is, it's not made of gold. No matter how good the Huangzhou bud paper is, it's not made of jade. In the past, Wang Xing of calligraphy's most famous night writing preface was only sold for 8,000 taels of silver. Do you think I'm a god? At this moment, he naturally did not know that the seller, Zhongli, who was standing on the platform, had estimated the chicken soup calligraphy to be sold at a total of 30,000 taels of silver. The beautiful woman from the House of Red Sleeves carried the agarwood table and slowly walked up to the platform. She was extremely beautiful and made people forget about her. She walked like a willow tree on a lake. However, no one in the attic looked at her. Instead, they looked at the note on the wooden table. Of course, the note had been carefully framed by the appraisal masters in Stone House. It was not exaggerated, but it added a sense of wonder. However, a note was still a note. It was just that in the eyes of the people, this note was no longer a note. It was a large sum of money or a small piece of land. The beautiful woman clearly sensed that no one in Stone House was paying attention to her. They were only looking at the section she was holding. However, she did not show any annoyance or sadness. Instead, she lifted her chin slightly. Compared to her previous elegant and gentle demeanor, she seemed incomparably proud. This was because the entire Chang and city knew about the relationship between Ning Ke and the House of Red Sleeves. This legendary calligraphy section was written by Ning Ke when he was drunk in the House of Red Sleeves. She was a girl from the House of Red Sleeves. Of course, she had reason to be proud. It was quiet in the attic. Only the sound of the willow tree on the lake could be heard. Then, a few slightly heavy breathing sounds could be faintly heard. Everyone's eyes were fixed on the calligraphy section on the wooden table. Everyone knew the origin and reputation of this chicken soup calligraphy, as well as the legend related to it. In advance, they knew that the last of the 7 calligraphy pieces of the old brush pen shop was the chicken soup calligraphy. However, at this moment, they finally saw the authentic chicken soup calligraphy, and they still could not hide their shock. The silence continued. Compared to the intense bidding of the previous 6 calligraphy sections, the silence now was unusually strange. It seemed that everyone was waiting for something. The seller, Zhongli, stood on the platform with a calm expression. He did not say a word. He did not introduce the chicken soup calligraphy, nor did he ask the previous guests for their opinion. He let the silence continue to ferment. He was not worried about the awkward silence at all. Ning Ke had never seen such a scene. He was a little worried. He was worried that the awkward silence would last too long. He was worried that the chicken soup calligraphy would not be able to sell for a high price. He had paid a great price to make up for Grand Secretary Wang's hurt feelings. Chu Yuxian had vaguely guessed Ning Ke's intention. He also guessed that the theft at the old brush pen shop was purely a rumor. He asked in a low voice, "Should I try to bid first?" Ning Ke thought for a while and said, "Let's wait for a while. Even if others don't say anything, the steward of Grand Secretary Wang's mansion will definitely bid." He thought of something and said with a frown, "I'm just worried that His Majesty has found out about this. The palace has informed the outside world, so no one dares to bid." Chu Yuxian smiled and said, "You don't have to worry about this. I heard from Jean Wuxia in the academy yesterday that His Majesty did mention about today's auction after the court meeting. He said that it was related to theft and asked the imperial court to pay attention to the situation. However, Grand Secretary Wang reprimanded him." Ning Ke only then knew that there was such a story. He could not help but laugh. "His Majesty wants to find a way to sneak my things into the palace. He doesn't even think about whether the officials will be happy about it." Chu Yuxian said, "Yes, and I heard that Grand Secretary Wang and Old Chancellor made things difficult at the same time. In the end, they forced His Majesty to promise not to use the palace treasury to buy the calligraphy." Hearing this, Ning Ke felt even more gratified. Chu Yuxian said again, "But I heard that Grand Secretary Wang's mansion has said that whoever dares to snatch the chicken soup calligraphy will be against Grand Secretary Wang. Now that everyone is so quiet and no one has bid, it must be because of this." Hearing this, Ning Ke was furious. He said angrily, this old man, I have already given him so many things, and he still dares to play this trick on me. Later, when his steward bids, if no one bids, you will bring it up for me." After a long period of silence, a voice finally rang out in the pavilion of Stone House. The voice came from the best bamboo pavilion on the east side of the third floor. Everyone knew that the steward of Grand Secretary Wang was sitting in that bamboo pavilion. The steward's voice was calm, but the price he shouted was shocking. 10,000 taels. The entire pavilion was shocked, and then the entire pavilion fell silent. Although everyone had vaguely guessed that this chicken soup calligraphy would definitely be sold at a shocking price today, no one had expected that the first bid had already surpassed the final price of the Master of Calligraphy's night preface. It had set a new record for calligraphy auctions. Ning Kei's body leaned forward slightly. When he heard the voice, he immediately relaxed and leaned back in his chair. He thought to himself that Grand Secretary Wang was quite kind. Even if no one else bid against him, he probably had enough money in his hands. Grand Secretary Wang was a senior statesman of the Tang Empire for 3 dynasties. Even princely Pei Yan had to bow to him when he entered the imperial court. Such a big shot had announced in advance, and now he bid such a high price with great sincerity. All of a sudden, the building became quiet, and it seemed that no one wanted to compete with him. Ning Kei thought so too. Then he wondered if he should ask Chu Yuxian to raise the price of the chicken soup calligraphy. Even if he did not raise it by too much, it would still be a good thing to have 2,000 or 3,000 taels of silver. Zhongli, who was on the stage, looked at the pavilion on the third floor with a calm smile. He repeated the bid from the Grand Secretary mansion. From his expression, it seemed that only he was certain that this was not the final price. Zhongli seemed to be waiting for something. As expected, just when everyone thought that the calligraphy auction was coming to an end, a voice rang out in a pavilion on the west side of the third floor of Stone House. 15,000 taels of silver. The entire pavilion was shocked again, and then the entire pavilion fell silent again. Chu Yuxian was so nervous that he felt a little hot. He kept fanning himself and walked out of the pavilion. He wanted to see clearly who dared to bid against Grand Secretary Wang. Ning Kei's mood improved. Even though Stone House had the responsibility to protect the identity and privacy of the bidders, and there were curtains made of bamboo in front of the pavilion to cover the movements inside, this was Cheng, and after all, there were only a few people who could afford to enter Stone House with such status. Not long after, the identity of the bidder on the west side of the third floor was found out. Immediately, there was a lot of discussion in the pavilion. It's a royal merchant from the South Jin Kingdom who came to Cheng and to buy. Chu Yuxian panted as he walked back to his room. He wiped his sweat as he reported what he had just heard. He's actually from the South Jin Kingdom? Ning Kei was a little shocked. Even though his calligraphy was famous in the world, the South Jin Kingdom had always been hostile to the Tang Empire. The people from the South Jin Kingdom must have looked down on him, a Tang calligrapher. Why would they choose such an occasion to buy his calligraphy? One must know that this was equivalent to raising the prestige of the Tang Empire. Chu Yuxian said, I heard that the royal merchant from the South Jin Kingdom works for the Crown Prince. Ning Kei was even more shocked. After thinking for a while, he asked hesitantly, the Crown Prince of the South Jin Kingdom does not like men, right? I'm going to walk the dog first. The third chapter will probably come out later. There seems to be something wrong with the dog's eyes. I may take it to see a doctor tomorrow. I'll report to everyone first. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 430. The South Jin royal merchant in the West Pavilion on the third floor was willing to offend the bigwigs of the Tang Empire to participate in the bidding for the chicken soup calligraphy. This could only be the will of the Crown Prince behind the royal merchant. As the future emperor of the South Jin Kingdom, who was the most hostile to the Tang Empire, he was willing to spend a large sum of money to purchase the chicken soup calligraphy to make a name for Ning Quebec. Other than the fact that he was crazy, Ning Ke could not understand why. In the end, his train of thought deviated from the right path and entered the realm of evil. Chu Yuxian did not know that Ning Ke's question was full of hidden meanings. He replied, "The South Jin Kingdom Crown Prince is known for being lecherous. How would he be interested in men? I have never heard of him liking calligraphy." Just as the two of them were conversing, the bidding for the chicken soup calligraphy in stone residence became more and more intense. There were still only two parties bidding, the steward of the Grand Secretary's mansion and the royal merchant from the South Jin Kingdom. But with just the two of them bidding, sparks flew in all directions. Ning Ke had long forgotten why the Crown Prince of South Jin Kingdom wanted to buy the chicken soup stickers as he listened to the increasing bids and the increasing amount of money. He was very satisfied. Not long after, the price of the chicken soup calligraphy rose to 18,000 taels of silver. The sound of curtains being drawn could be heard from the third floor. The butler of Grand Secretary Wang's mansion walked out with a sullen face. He stood by the railing and looked in the direction of the West Pavilion. He sneered and said, "The Tang Empire has always convinced people with reason and virtue. This is Chang'an. I will not bully you people from the South Jin Kingdom." The bamboo curtain of the West Pavilion was lifted, and a slightly plump middle-aged merchant with a ruddy complexion slowly walked out. He was dressed in a brocade robe with a jade pendant on his waist. He had an extraordinary bearing. He looked at the chief steward and said, "I have an important mission, so I don't dare to give up easily. Please forgive me, chief steward." The price had been shouted, and the harsh words had been spoken. What followed was naturally a repeat of the previous bidding process. Although none of the parties suddenly increased the price by too much, as time passed, the price of the chicken soup calligraphy on the stage gradually increased to a jaw-dropping level, 31,000 taels of silver. 32,000 taels of silver, 33,000 taels of silver. The chief steward of the Grand Secretary's mansion looked gloomy as he stared at the South Jin merchant in the West Pavilion and bid 33,000 taels of silver. With the Grand Secretary's seniority as a senior statesman of 3 dynasties, no matter how strict the laws of the Tang Empire were, it could not stop the riches hidden in his mansion. 30,000 taels of silver was indeed a lot, but it would not frighten the chief steward. However, everyone knew that he was backed by Grand Secretary Wang. A courtier spending 10,000 taels of silver on a section of calligraphy would definitely cause some discussion. Therefore, he wanted to see the merchant from the South Jin Kingdom back off. Who would have thought that the South Jin Kingdom royal merchant would add another 1,000 taels of silver without hesitation? Looking at his calm expression, it seemed that he would not care even if he added tens of thousands of taels of silver. The chief caretaker of the Grand Scholar Manor looked even gloomier. There were some foreign envoys and merchants in the stone house. Most of them were Tangs, the wealthiest kind. They could not help but feel annoyed at the South Jin royal merchant's actions. It was not that they did not have money, but no matter how much they loved Sir Ning's calligraphy, they would feel that the price was too high. The South Jin royal merchant did not seem like he was here to buy the section. Instead, he seemed like he was here to compete with the Tangs, or even to embarrass them. Discussion started in the pavilion. 2 royal merchants from the Tang Empire who lived in the south city of Chang and prepared to bid. The atmosphere became more heated, or rather, tense. The only person who could remain calm was probably the seller, Zhongli. He had long known that the South Jin royal merchant was in Chang'an, so he had expected such a scene. It could even be said that he had single-handedly caused the conflict between the Tangs and the South Jin Kingdom. Zhongli was the son of the Zhong family in Yangguan. Yangguan was the most prosperous city in the southern border of the Tang Empire. It was very close to the South Jin Kingdom. In fact, it had been the northern capital of the South Jin Kingdom 300 years ago. As such, the people who lived there knew the South Jin Kingdom very well. Even though he had been chased out of the Zhong family a long time ago, He knew everything that had happened in the South Jin Kingdom. He was well aware of the sensitivity and even abnormal self-esteem of the South Jin Kingdom people when they faced the Tangs. Because of something, he was certain that the South Jin royal merchant would not give up on the chicken soup calligraphy no matter what. That was why he dared to say in front of everyone that the chicken soup calligraphy would sell for at least 30,000 taels of silver. Now that it had passed the 30,000 taels of silver, Zhongli could not help but feel proud. As a seller, his greatest honor was to leave his name in the history books along with the goods he sold. As a seller, Zhongli could be calm, happy, and proud. However, as the owner of the stone house, the boss found that the atmosphere was too intense and out of control. He could not be happy no matter what. It was good to earn more commission, but what would he do if he offended two important figures? The boss stood behind a pillar on the first floor. He looked at Zhongli with a gloomy expression and signaled with his eyes. Zhongli understood and began to try to reduce the atmosphere. However, as an imperial merchant of the Tang Empire brazenly joined the battle, his attempt to end the auction suddenly turned into a bubble. Hearing the increasing amount of money, even Zhongli, who had seen more extravagant auctions and bigger scenes, began to feel nervous and even terrified. The bidding had already become a battle between the Tang and the South Jin Kingdom. Although this battle had nothing to do with powerhouses or cavalry, it was only about money. However, it was not something he could control. Zhongli lifted his sleeves to wipe his sweat. He realized that he had underestimated the determination of the people of Cheng and to protect their pride. He had also underestimated the influence of the crown prince of the South Jin Kingdom on the South Jin royal merchant. The royal merchant of the South Jin Kingdom made another unbelievable offer. Then, he looked at the nobles of the Tang Empire in the pavilion and smiled. The South Jin Kingdom is not as wealthy as the Tang Empire, and I'm just a small merchant. I'm not worthy of your attention. However, the South Jin Kingdom is one of the few big countries, and we still have some silver in our treasury. Hearing this, the pavilion was in an uproar. Although the Tang people present were rich, if the South Jin royal merchant used the South Jin Kingdom's national treasury to bid, who could be his match? Unless the Tang emperor took out the silver from the palace treasury and bid. Just as the merchant had said, although the South Jin Kingdom was not as wealthy as the Tang Empire, how could a royal merchant or a grand secretary compare to the amount of silver in their national treasury? Were they really going to be humiliated by the South Jin royal merchant today? Although they could bid as high as they wanted, what if the South Jin royal merchant suddenly stopped bidding? They could not go back on their word when the time came. The laws of the Tang Empire were not just for show in Cheng'an. How can you use the silver in the national treasury to fight with someone? Ning Ke looked at the South Jin royal merchant. He could not understand what was happening. Chu Yuxian said mockingly, how would such a backward country know any rules? Do you think it's like the Tang Empire? In the eyes of the South Jin Emperor and the Crown Prince, the national treasury is their own accounting room. They can use it however they want. At this moment, a subordinate of the Grand Secretary hurried to the steward's side and whispered a few words. The steward, who had been silent for a while, turned to look at the South Jin royal merchant in the West Pavilion. He laughed coldly and said, I was wondering why the South Jin Crown Prince was so interested in the chicken soup calligraphy. So it's because of the Hill Master of the Great River Kingdom. The South Jin royal merchant did not deny it. He smiled and said, that's right. His Highness knows that the Hill Master loves the chicken soup calligraphy, so he decided to buy it and give it to you. The chief steward looked at the royal merchant from the South Jin Kingdom and suddenly laughed out loud. He said mockingly, everyone knows that the Hill Master is infatuated with Mr. Ning Ke of the Tang Empire. That's why she loves the chicken soup calligraphy so much. Does the Crown Prince expect that the chicken soup calligraphy can replace Mr. Ning Ke in the Hill Master's heart? This is ridiculous and ridiculous to the extreme. The South Jin royal merchant's expression changed. The steward did not wait for him to speak. He continued mockingly, you're trying to use something that belongs to a woman's beloved to make her fall in love with someone else. I really don't know what the Crown Prince is thinking. I didn't expect the South Jin people to be trash on the battlefield. The sword master from the sword garret is trash. You're even so useless in love. The South Jin royal merchant's face darkened at the humiliation. His sleeves trembled and his fists were clenched tightly. However, there was nothing wrong with the steward's words. The South Jin army had never been a match for the Tang cavalry on the battlefield. Lu Qingshan from the sword garret had indeed been killed by Ning Ke at the side door of the academy. The story between the calligraphy addict, Mo Shanshan, and Ning Ke had been spread around the world for many days. The royal merchant suppressed his anger and scolded coldly, "The bidding for the calligraphy is based on strength. Speak if you have money. Don't talk if you don't. Do you think the Tangs only know how to talk?" The moment he said that, the Tangs in the pavilion immediately cursed at him. However, he ignored them and looked at the seller on the stage with a gloomy expression. It seemed like he had made up his mind to use money to pressure the seller. Ning Ke did not expect the South Jin Crown Prince to buy the chicken soup calligraphy at such a high price just to please Shanshan. After a moment of silence, he took out something from his sleeve and handed it to Chu Yuxian. After saying a few words, he lifted the curtain and walked out of the stone house. Chu Yuxian was stunned for a moment. He gripped the item tightly and walked downstairs to find the owner of the stone house. The owner of the stone house recognized him as old Master Chu's only son and was slightly stunned. He took the seal from Chu Yuxian and glanced at it. His expression changed drastically. This seal was Ning Ke's private seal and rarely appeared on his calligraphy sections. Not many calligraphy appraisers had seen it before. However, the owner had seen it on the back of the chicken soup calligraphy. The owner then realized that Sir Ning had been quietly watching the auction in the pavilion. When he saw Chu Yuxian's private seal, he thought that Sir Ning was expressing his dissatisfaction and anger. He could not help but feel uneasy. Could it be that his judgment of the old brush pen shop's calligraphy sections was wrong? Did the handmaiden really steal it? He heaved a sigh of relief when he heard Chu Yuxian's words. Chu Yuxian gestured for him to bring him to the stage and invited the famous seller to the side. The people in the pavilion noticed the commotion on the stage and gradually stopped their discussions and cursing. The South Jin royal merchant stood by the railing expressionlessly and looked at the stage. He thought that no matter what the Tangs did, the chicken soup calligraphy would definitely be brought back to the South Jin kingdom today. The owner cupped his fists and bowed to the people in the three pavilions. He then cleared his throat and said, "The chicken soup calligraphy is confirmed to be won by room A2 for 33,000 taels of silver." The pavilion was silent because no one had realized what was going on. Then someone reacted and let out a soft cry of confusion. Room A2 was where the steward of Grand Secretary Wang's residence resided. However, the bidding had not ended. Why did the stone house say that the Grand Secretary Wang's residence had won the chicken soup calligraphy? The South Jin royal merchant's face was livid as he looked downstairs. He questioned coldly, "Even if the bidding ended, I was the one who paid the most. Why did the calligraphy go to someone else? Could it be that all the Tang people do business like this? Don't you care about your reputation?" Chu Yuxian recalled what Ning Ke had said before he left. After making sure that he remembered every word correctly, he looked at him and said mockingly, "So what if you have more money? I won't sell it to you no matter how much money you have. Because Mr. 13 doesn't respect the Crown Prince of South Jin. He actually wrote more than 10,000 words. It seems like energy is really like water in a sponge. There are only a few recommendation votes now. Please squeeze, take a look and vote. Thank you very much. There's another important matter. Taiwanese readers, please be happy. The Jianye traditional Chinese calligraphy will be sold in bookstores on the 5th of July. I've looked at the cover carefully. I like it very much. There's no problem with it. However, it involves spoilers. Wahahaha, welcome to buy it. The more the better. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 431. Ning Ke was the most inconspicuous in the back of the mountain of the academy, but Mr. 13 was the most famous among the people. His name was spread in the military camp at the frontier fortress, and the people in the streets of Cheng, and were talking about the slash at the side door of the academy. The people in the stone house might not know Mr. First or Mr. Second, but how could they not know that Mr. 13 was the owner of the old brush pen shop, Sir Ning? After Chu Yuxian said those words on the stage, the pavilion was silent for a moment. Then, there was a sudden burst of cheers and shouts of excitement. The South Jean royal merchant gripped the railing tightly, his face pale with anger. He glared at Chu Yuxian and shouted, "Who are you?" Chu Yuxian held his fan with one hand and placed the other on the back of his hand. He bowed to the crowd and said, "I am Chu Yuxian from Dongcheng, Mr. Ning's representative." Then he looked at the West Pavilion on the third floor and at the ugly expression of the South Jean royal merchant. He smiled and said, "I can sell the chicken soup calligraphy to anyone but you South Jean people. Do you have a problem with that?" The South Jean royal merchant trembled with anger and scolded, "How can you say that?" The owner of the stone house cupped his hands and explained, "Today, the old brush pen shop's 7 calligraphy pieces have special rules. The supplementary rules have been sent to everyone. Everyone should know that Sir Ning has the right to choose his own buyer." The South Jean royal merchant thought of the document he had seen on the table in the pavilion and suppressed his anger. His chest heaved up and down as he said, "Even if Sir Ning has the right to choose his own buyer, he should be the one to do it. How can he let this representative who we don't even know is the real one exercise his right? Did the old brush pen shop know about what happened just now? Was Sir Ning here just now? You Tangs, don't use such shameless methods." The owner was silent for a moment before he smiled and said, "You are right. Sir Ning was here just now, but he has already left." Before he left, he asked Mr. Chu to make the decision. The South Jean royal merchant was stunned. As mentioned earlier, Ning Ke's reputation in Cheng and was too resounding. Especially after he killed Lu Yiqing, his position in the hearts of the Tangs was extremely high. Everyone wanted to see his true face. At this time, the high officials and nobles in the pavilion were originally here for his calligraphy. When they heard that he was in the pavilion earlier, they couldn't help but beat their chests and stamp their feet in regret. Someone shouted, and the sound of footsteps rang out in the pavilion. Dozens of people opened the bamboo curtains and rushed down the wooden building, unable to restrain their curiosity and excitement, towards the outside of the courtyard. The chicken soup calligraphy had already belonged to Grand Secretary Wang's residence. The people present could not drink the chicken soup, so of course they wanted to see what the old hen that made the soup looked like. In the blink of an eye, the stone house was empty. The royal merchant of South Jean Kingdom stood by the railing. His expression was extremely ugly, but he had nothing to say. "Honorable Ning, wait a moment. Mr. 13, wait. My master invites you over." People walked out of the courtyard, passed through the green forest, and came to the shore of Willow Lake. Looking at the boat that was getting further and further away from the quiet lake, they waved their arms and shouted for Ning Ke to come back. The boat leisurely moved on the quiet lake. From afar, they could only see a figure dressed in black walking out of the black canopy. He greeted them with his hands folded in front of his chest, and then went ashore. Looking at the back of the figure disappearing into the alley beside the Victory House, the people by the lake sighed with regret. There was a rumor in Cheng and City that the 7 calligraphy sections being auctioned by the stone house were stolen by the little handmaiden of the old brush pen shop. Ning Ke was present today, so naturally, this rumor was denied in some ways. While the auction of the stone house was going on, the little handmaiden Sang Sang was in a quiet study in the backyard of the Ingo Casino in the western city. She was staring at the pile of papers on the table. Since the night at the Spring Breeze Pavilion 2 years ago, the underworld of Cheng and City had been under the control of the Fish Dragon Gang. The study of this casino, which used to belong to a big shot in the western city, had become the Fish Dragon gang's warehouse. The papers on the table looked a little new, and the handwriting on them was neat. They were not outstanding, and could not be compared to the calligraphy sections in the old brush pen shop. However, the actual value of these papers was actually quite high. These papers were the title deeds of houses and land. Several old stewards of the casino with deep wrinkles were calculating the title deeds of houses and land. Mr. Chi, the leader of the Fish Dragon gang, stood aside and stared at them worriedly. The beads on the abacus in the hands of the old stewards moved very fast, making a clicking sound in the quiet room. It sounded crisp and pleasant, but it made Mr. Chi more and more worried. The beads on the abacus were still moving fast, and there was still a long time before the calculation was completed. Sang Sang put down the title deed of the newly built three-sectioned house on the lakeside and said, 41,462 taels of silver are still missing. Mr. Chi looked at her with a slightly strange expression, thinking that these stewards were the best accounting experts in the casino, but they had not calculated it yet. Where did she get this number? Sang Sang knew what he was thinking, but she did not explain and waited calmly. After some time, the old stewards of the casino finally finished the complicated calculation. The leading steward carefully cleaned up the title deeds of houses and land on the table, and respectfully reported, according to the letter of intent a few days ago, the total number is still missing is 41,600 taels of silver. This number was a little different from the number Sang Sang had calculated, but not by much. Mr. Chi looked at Sang Sang in surprise, thinking that it was really amazing that she could only make such a small mistake in mental calculation. Sang Sang knew that her calculation was correct, and those old stewards had calculated the tax rate wrong on a title deed. However, thinking that the difference was not big, she did not point it out. Looking at her expression, Mr. Chi made a gesture to let those stewards of the casino leave, and then said seriously, the price of houses and land at the foot of Yanming Mountain is indeed cheaper than other places in Cheng'an City, but if we buy so many houses at once, some greedy guys will always raise the price. Then he shook his head and said, although the brothers in the gang can lower the price, and the Cheng'an local government has also talked to someone, we can't go too far. If someone reported this to the imperial court, it would be hard for me to explain to second brother Chow when he comes back. So this is probably the final price. It turned out that the title deeds of houses and land on the table were the deeds of the houses by the Yanming Lake. The Yanming Lake had recently been dredged by the Ministry of Works of the Imperial Court, and the accumulated lake mud was still piled up near the sand and stone mountains. It was said that it would not be better until next summer. Because of this, although the scenery of the Yanming Lake at the foot of Yanming Mountain was beautiful, it was still not a good place for people in Cheng'an who paid attention to the quality of life. The land and housing prices by the Yanming Lake were the cheapest in Cheng'an City. Nowadays, most of the houses by the lake were dilapidated old houses, and the occasional new houses were built by ordinary people who were greedy for cheap. Hearing Mr. Chi's words, Sang Sang nodded and said, young master has already predicted that the price will be raised. These days, Mr. Chi had been secretly buying the title deeds of houses and land by the Yanming Lake at Ning Kei's request. As the leader of the biggest gang in Cheng'an City, he naturally had countless subordinates to do this for him. But at this time, he still did not understand why Ning Kei wanted to buy these properties. It's good to stroll by the Yanming Lake occasionally. It's not suitable to live there. He frowned and said, even if you want to live there, you don't have to buy all the houses by the lake. No matter how low the price is, it's still a huge sum. Sang Sang said, I don't know why young master wants to buy all the houses by the lake. Maybe he wants to be quiet and doesn't want to be disturbed. Mr. Chi shook his head repeatedly and thought that if he really wanted to be quiet, there would be so many beautiful places in Cheng'an City to build new houses, and there would be no need to make such a big noise. And it was obviously a losing deal. More than 40,000 taels of silver. Sang Sang looked at the title deeds of houses and land on the table and said to herself, I don't know if it will be enough. Mr. Chi said, I do have some money in my hands, but it's all in the public account. I just manage it for second brother Chow and other brothers, so I can't take it out. Sang Sang nodded and said, "Thank you, Mr. Chi." Mr. Chi waved his hand to show that it was okay, and then he came up with an idea and said, "In fact, as long as Ning Ke enters the palace and says something, it's not a big deal to get more than 40,000 taels of silver." Sang Sang thought about Ning Ke's intention of buying the houses by the Yanming Lake and understood that he definitely did not want to have anything to do with the imperial court. She shook her head and said, "Let's see what happens in the stone house." "There's no need." Ning Ke walked into the room and looked at the title deeds of houses and land on the table. He said, "If the price on the letter of intent will not change, then we have enough money in hand." Mr. Chi sneered and said, "The price we offered is already very generous, and we have already signed the letter of intent. If the owners of the houses by the lake temporarily raise the price, do they really think our brothers of the Fish Dragon Gang are a group of people who believe in Buddhism?" Ning Ke liked Mr. Chi's attitude very much and said, "The money will probably be sent here later. At that time, I'll have to trouble you to sign the contract with the owners of the houses." Mr. Chi was a little surprised and asked, "Whose name?" Ning Ke said, "Second brother Chow's name first." It was not uncommon for people in Jianghu to entrust their property to their brothers. Mr. Chi said without hesitation, "Okay." Ning Ke said, "Can this matter be kept a secret?" Mr. Chi said, "It depends on how long it takes." Ning Ke calculated the time and said, "This winter at the latest." Mr. Chi said, "No problem." After leaving the Ingo Casino in the western city, Ning Ke and Sang Sang did not directly go back to the old brush pen shop, but went to Yanming Mountain. The two looked at the lake at the foot of the mountain and those scattered courtyards on the other side of the lake. The reason why they bought these courtyards was that the old brush pen shop was too busy now. Although Ning Ke liked the lively atmosphere of Lin 47th Street very much, he knew that he could not continue to live there after the visit of the great divine priest of revelation. He bought all the courtyards by the lake for the sake of tranquility, but there were other more important reasons. However, those reasons did not need to be known by others. Sang Sang looked at the houses on the other side of the lake and asked, "Will we live here in the future?" Ning Ke nodded and said, "After winter, this lake will be frozen solid. Only one chapter today. Then I feel that my state is almost back. I'll go to work on the outline. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for it. Your support is my biggest motivation." Chapter 432. It was late spring in Chang'an and the temperature was getting hotter. But it was the best season in the wilderness in the north. The breeze blew through the knee-high grass like a green ocean. About 50 miles north of the left king's palace, there were many colors in the green ocean near the Min Mountain. The scorched ground, the cut grass roots, the broken arrows that were deeply embedded in the ground, and the traces left by the tactical arrays showed that a war had just ended here. The war came to the wilderness with spring and ended as spring deepened. The Central Plains Allied forces were strong and with the help of the palace's cavalry, they started a series of battles with the desolate man tribes that were migrating south. The cruel war lasted for nearly 100 days and many people died on both sides. However, the desolate man managed to hold on to the last line of defense and kept the most important and fertile pastures. The West Hill Divine Palace issued an edict and all the country's provisions were continuously transported to the Yen Kingdom. Even with the help of powerful cultivators, they still failed to drive the desolate man back to the cold region. The reason was that the desolate man warriors were strong. The Tang cavalry and the West Hill Papal cavalrymen did not take action. The smell of burning embers floated on the grassland after the war. Not far away, on the sloping meadow of Min Mountain, there were hundreds of piles of stones. All kinds of cloth strips were hung on the piles, dancing in the spring breeze. These piles of stones were the graves of the grassland cavalrymen. Bodies of the desolate man warriors were rarely seen on the grassland because no matter how fierce the war was, the desolate man would bring their dead companions back to the tribe at all costs. After nearly 100 days of war, the Central Plains Coalition Army did not capture a single desolate man. The Tang cavalry, who rode on horses to clean up the battlefield, looked at the piles of stones in the distance and thought of the desolate man's performance on the battlefield. They were vigilant and a little impressed. Never be a captive and never leave a comrade behind. This was also the iron rule of the Tang army. The Tang army finally understood why the desolate men were called natural-born warriors 1,000 years ago and why their ancestors spent so much effort to drive the desolate men out of the wilderness. They were all the best warriors, so it was not surprising that the Tang army admired the desolate man tribe. They wanted to find a chance to fight with the powerful desolate man. Regretfully, in this bloody and cruel war, the Great Tang's northeast border army was responsible for escorting supplies, suppressing rebellions, maintaining military discipline, and cleaning up the battlefield. It had no chance of entering the main battlefield. Because this was the will of the Great Tang Emperor, as well as the order of General Xiahou. Xiahou looked at the fertile grassland under his feet and the grass roots that had been stepped into the soil by his boots. He slowly moved the soles of his boots, and with a soft sizzling sound, something that looked like oil squeezed out from the side of his boots. In addition to the rotten black soil, there was also a lot of rotten blood. Since the start of the war, the cavalry under his command had yet to face the warriors of the desolate man tribe. They had not even seen a single desolate man. However, he was not as curious and excited as his subordinates to fight with them, because he was a desolate man himself. Looking at the black bloodstains left on the grassland, Xiahou imagined the last battle a few days ago. He imagined the scene of his clansmen, whom he had not seen for a long time, falling under arrows or flying swords. His indifferent face was expressionless, but his eyebrows slightly twitched. The cavalry of the Tang Empire did not go to the front of the battlefield. This was His Majesty's order, as well as his own thoughts. His Majesty knew of his background, but still let him personally command the war. This meant that he agreed with his thoughts. Xiahou was very grateful for His Majesty's trust. A clear whistle came from afar. He looked up expressionlessly and saw a grassland girl riding a horse and herding hundreds of sheep a few hundred feet below the meadow. Not long after the war, the people on the grassland started herding again. From this point of view, life was always peaceful and simple. The war was just an interlude. Looking at the grassland girl with rosy cheeks and bright eyes, Xiahou remembered the scene when he escaped from the front gate many years ago and met his sister again in Hebei County. Then he confirmed that his gratitude to His Majesty had nothing to do with the trust and tolerance he had shown over the years. He was just grateful that His Majesty treated his sister well. Mr. Ku destroyed the front gate of the Devil's Doctrine with a single sword. Xiahou went south to the Tang Empire and served in the army for decades. In the end, he became the top general of the Tang Empire. Then he became a distinguished visiting professor of the West Hill Divine Palace. But no one knew that he was a remnant of the Devil's Doctrine and a descendant of the desolate man. General Xiahou seemed to be ruthless and powerful, but in reality, the few important figures in the world who knew his true identity had always tried to use his past identity to threaten and control him. His true identity was like countless spider webs, trapping him in the center of the web. No matter how he struggled, he could not break free. He could only gradually fall silent and then gradually suffocate. The Emperor of the Tang Empire and the hierarch of the West Hill Divine Palace knew where he came from. Both of them were like two indestructible stone walls that had been slowly closing in on each other over the years. Sandwiched between the stone walls, he found it hard to breathe. No matter which side he leaned towards, he would die. He once thought of leaning on both sides of the stone walls. He wanted to be loyal to the Tang Empire and serve the West Hill at the same time. In the past few years, he had indeed done so. But two loyalties could not get along. So in the end, he could only be loyal to himself. He maintained his strength with violence and coldness, and did not lean against the stone walls. Regrettably, there was a limit to a person's strength. He was still very strong now, but he would grow old, get sick, and become weak. However, those 2 stone walls would never become weak. Moreover, he had killed many people, and those people wanted to kill him very much. So Xiaohou wanted to make himself strong forever. He went to the north of the Hulun Sea and wanted to seize the tomes of arcane. But in the end, he lost all hope in front of the scholar. When he was truly in despair, he suddenly had a new hope. In front of him at the end of his rope, there was suddenly a glimmer of hope. That scholar made Xiaohou give up on the idea of being powerful forever, of being insufferably arrogant forever. But he also discovered the possibility of returning safely and not caring about the affairs of the world. Summer is coming. Everything is coming to an end. Xiaohou looked at the grassland in the spring breeze and thought of the coming midsummer. A rare gentle expression gradually appeared on his cold face. His sister was the empress of the Tang Empire. His sister's name was Summer. The gentle spring breeze blew on the general's gentle face. There was a strong smell of blood in the wind, and then there was a sound of weeding. Not far behind Xiaohou, more than 100 grassland cavalrymen and Yen soldiers knelt on the ground. Under the bright knife light, their heads were separated from their bodies, and blood flowed into the sea of grass. These grassland cavalrymen and Yen soldiers were arrested for rebellion and violation of rules. They were all killed without a trial, just because of General Xiaohou's words. On the battlefield, the northeast border military of the Tang Empire was responsible for maintaining military discipline and suppressing rebellions. But today's execution without a trial had seriously violated the rules of the Divine Hall and the law of the Tang Empire. But the law of the Tang Empire could not control the general. So Xiaohou killed people like grass. His expression did not change. An officer rode a warhorse and galloped from the direction of the military camp. Xiaohou took the letter handed by the officer. Although he was stationed in Tuyang City all year round and was far away in the wilderness, he was after all the defender general of the Tang Empire. He had many spies in Chang'an City and the imperial court. He did not have many personal relationships with defender general of the state Su Shi, but they respected each other. So some things in the military ministry would be passed directly to the military camp through those spies. The letter described what had happened in Chang'an City recently. Xiaohou knew about the 2 conversations between Su Shi and Ning Quebec. He also knew about the death of Huang Xing and Yushui Zhu on the rainy street. So he read the letter in silence for a long time. Last year in Tuyang City, he had reached an agreement with the academy. So he did not want to care about the academy's entry into the human realm and would not be as vigilant as Su Shi. However, the death of Huang Xing and Yushui Zhu made him vigilant. Huang Xing and Yushui Zhu were the prince's men, and also his men. And they were both involved in that incident. Xiaohou did not understand why Ning Ke was against him. First he killed Lin Ling in the wilderness, then he killed Gu Shi in Tuyang City, and now he killed Huang Xing and Yushui Zhu. All the people close to him had died one by one under his knife. The imperial court and the academy had agreed to his retirement, but it seemed that this person had a different opinion. Is there really a fish that escaped the net? Xiaohou frowned slightly and shook his head after thinking for a moment. He knew very well that Lin Guangyuan's son was dead. Because he had personally examined the body of the white and clean little boy. Then he remembered a saying in Chang'an City. The academy's Ning Ke and Princess Li Yu were close. Was it because of the dragon throne? Xiaohou's expression grew colder and colder. He had already decided to retire, but if someone tried to harm his sister, harm his nephew, or steal the throne that belonged to his nephew, then he would kill the other party at all costs. The executions continued. The heads of the soldiers who violated the rules were cut off and fell on the grassland. The sound of bones scraping could be heard continuously. In the smell of blood, Xiaohou thought about what happened in Chang'an and gradually became murderous. At this moment, a figure suddenly appeared in the blue sky above the grassland. The man jumped down from the sky, whistling through the air, and rushed towards Xia Ho with an incomparably domineering murderous intent. Xia Ho looked up. In addition to the figure in the sky, there was also the blazing sun. So he narrowed his eyes. He was already very familiar with this scene. He had seen it on the northern shore of the Hulun Sea. These days, he had seen it several times. So he did not panic, and his expression was still calm and indifferent. An extremely fierce aura gushed out from his body. His leather boots stepped deeply into the soft grassland soil. The next moment, the soft soil instantly became extremely hard. With the soles of his boots as the center, countless traces like a spider web appeared on the grassland. Xia Ho stood in the middle of the grassland that was cracked like a spider web. With the huge counterforce from his feet, he flew into the sky. His battle robe fluttered. He was as fast as a flying bird and as bright as a god. Tang, the world wayfarer of the Devil's Doctrine, jumped down from the sky. Xia Ho, the former powerhouse of the Devil's Doctrine, flew into the sky. The two men met in the sky above the grassland. Once they met, it was like a bolt from the blue. In the clear sky, a muffled thunder suddenly sounded. A powerful shockwave began to spread from the sky in all directions. In the distance, the sheep that were lowering their heads to graze were startled and fell to the ground. The grassland girl who was herding the sheep was startled and fell off her horse. The Tang soldiers who were executing the military law covered their ears and knelt down in pain. The strong wind blew, and the sea of grass was flattened and broken grass was flying. I'm still one breath away. 1 chapter today and 2 chapters tomorrow. I'll gradually pull myself back to the state. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 433. The two silhouettes met in the air, like the legendary floating mountains in the depths of the western wilderness colliding with each other. The terrifying sound of the collision reverberated in all directions. The sharp blood-red broadsword stirred up countless whistling sounds in the air, as if the blue sky was about to be split open. However, most of the momentum of the broadsword was blocked by a pair of iron fists. Occasionally, the broadsword broke through Xia Ho's iron fists and fell on his body. Xia Ho's battle robe would emit a pale yellow luster, preventing the sharp broadsword from biting into his body. The blood-red broadsword was the most powerful weapon of the front gate of the Devil's Doctrine. Although it could not break into Xia Ho's body, its weight and the impact made it a horrible iron hammer, hitting Xia Ho's body heavily. Xia Ho's iron fists were iron hammers, mercilessly hitting Tang's chest and abdomen. In the blink of an eye, the two powerhouses of the Devil's Doctrine hit each other countless times in the air. They hit each other countless times. They hit each other countless times. They hit each other countless times. The two floating hills kept hitting each other, separating, and then colliding again. The sound of the collision, like muffled thunder, kept ringing in the sky not far from the grassland. The continuous rumbling of thunder was so close that the sheep lying in the sea of grass, their bodies stiff, instinctively felt the terror of death. Terrified, they propped up their limp legs and fled in all directions. The grassland girl, who fell from the horse, lay in the grass and looked at the two godlike figures in the sky. She was so shocked and scared that she turned into a fool. She couldn't care less about her flock of sheep. The soldiers of the Tang army, who were enforcing the military law, covered their ears and knelt on the grass with pale faces. 3 soldiers who were lucky enough not to be beheaded could not cover their ears because their hands were tied. Black blood gradually flowed out of the corners of their eyes and noses. A moment later, they were shocked to death by the collision of the two powerhouses in the air. The horses on the meadow neighed in panic. The heaviest muffled thunder sounded in the sky above the grassland. The fierce wind swept the earth from the sky, breaking the long grass and flying everywhere. The two figures in the air finally separated, retreated hundreds of feet, and fell on the grassland. Two muffled sounds almost at the same time sounded on the grassland. Xiahou and Tang's domineering aura leaked out a little as their feet landed on the ground. The grassland under their boots suddenly collapsed and turned into two pits. The spring grass in the pits turned into broken pieces, like newly built tombs that had not been sealed. Enemy attack. Assassins. Even though they were facing peerless powerhouses like the world wayfarer of the front gate of the Devil's Doctrine, the well-trained border army of the Tang army woke up with a strong will and began to organize a defense line. The sound of horses' hooves and armors collided incessantly. In the military camp at the bottom of the meadow, hundreds of heavily armored black cavalry of the Tang Empire assembled at an unimaginable speed. They formed two vanguard formations and galloped out of the camp, leaving grass and dust in their wake as they launched a surprise attack and sealed off the meadow. Then, there was the sound of wheels rolling. More than 10 heavy-duty crossbows were pushed out of the camp and aimed at the man on the meadow. Array masters, under the protection of powerful attendants, began to set up temporary arrays. The Tang cavalrymen stared at the man on the meadow with grim expressions. The enemy was only one person. The Tang army was fully prepared, but they still sensed an unprecedented danger. The atmosphere on the meadow became extremely tense. Tang stood in the meadow, stood in the slightly sunken pits, stood in front of hundreds of the most elite Tang cavalry in the world, stood in front of countless crossbow bolts. His expression was still calm, still silent, as if he had seen nothing. He only had eyes for Xiahou, who was not far away. Dun was still wearing the ordinary leather jacket, but compared to the past, his leather jacket looked more shabby, and many parts of it had even rotted. His expression was calm, but his face was somewhat haggard. He had helped the Senior Statesman Society lead the tribe to fight against the Central Plains Allied forces for many days. Recently, he had continuously attacked Xiahou and fought with the Tang army several times. Even if he was an Iron Man, he would still feel tired. Especially in the previous battle with Xiahou. Although it was a short battle, he had suffered serious injuries. Countless holes had appeared on the leather jacket between his chest and abdomen, and the color of blood could be vaguely seen. The blood-red saber in his hand was also somewhat dim. The Tang army was undoubtedly the most powerful army in the world. In the past years, under the command of General Xiahou, they had conquered the Yan Kingdom in the east and attacked the wilderness in the north. They had won every battle and conquered everything. They were extremely proud and confident. However, in front of this person, they could not be proud. The Tang army was not afraid of cultivators, because they thought that no matter how powerful a cultivator was, he was no different from an ordinary person in front of the black armored cavalry and crossbow bolts. But they had never seen a cultivator as powerful as Tang. The commander of the Tang cavalry stared at the man in the leather jacket in the distance and said coldly, "If we can't kill this monster today, how can we still call ourselves the Tang cavalry?" The hundreds of Tang cavalrymen on the meadow heard this and their expressions suddenly became solemn. They pulled out their padaos from their sheaths and collectively shouted, "Yes, sir." Hundreds of padaos were pulled out from their sheaths at the same time. The sound of the padaos being pulled together became very solemn and even tragic. In the days after the war between the Central Plains Coalition Army and the Desolate Man, the man in the leather jacket on the meadow appeared around the Tang army 7 times. The Tang cavalrymen had surrounded him 7 times, but none of them had succeeded. Instead, this man had killed many of them. He had even succeeded in advancing 3 times, until he was in front of General Xiahou. If the general was not powerful and invincible, he would have been killed by the man. Ordinary people were not as powerful as cultivators, and ordinary cavalrymen were not as powerful as cultivators. The Tang soldiers could accept this, but they could not accept that they could not even stop the man. They could not accept that as subordinates, they had to rely on the general to maintain the safety of the camp. For the proud Tang cavalrymen, this was the greatest humiliation. The bleak whistling of the military flute sounded around the meadow. Nearly 800 Tang cavalrymen in heavy armor began to slowly form a formation. The array master with crossbows in the camp also pushed forward dozens of feet. A battle between the world's strongest cavalrymen and the world's strongest cultivators was about to begin. After betraying the front gate, you really became a coward. You only know how to hide in the camp and always let your men die. Tang looked at Xiahou and said. Xiahou put his fist to his lips and coughed twice. He stretched out his hand to stop the actions of his subordinates around the meadow. Then he looked up at Tang and said, "My troops did not participate in the war against the tribe. You know very well why. So I don't understand why you have been trying to kill me since last year, even risking your life to kill me." Tang took off his felt hat and threw it at his feet. Then he slowly walked out of the collapsed sea of grass and stopped about 10 feet away from Xiahou. He said, "Because there are many people in the front gate waiting for you to go back." Xiahou frowned slightly. His eyebrows, which seemed like they were carved out of iron wire, looked cold and hard once he frowned. There was no one alive in the front gate of the Devil's Doctrine. There were only white skeletons and dead people on the ground. Then the people waiting for him to go back were not people, but those unwilling ghosts. Before the front gate was broken by Mr. Ku, your teacher, and I had already left. This has nothing to do with me. You can't blame me for this. But after you went south, you still became a visiting professor of the West Hill Divine Palace. Tang said, "A traitor is a traitor." The ancestors of the Enlightenment doctrine are all waiting for you to go back and apologize. Senior Sister Murong is also waiting for you in the steamer. Hearing the word Murong, Xiahou's frowned eyebrows gradually dimmed. After a long silence, he said, "It's not that easy to kill me." Tang said, "If I reveal your true identity, who in the world can tolerate you?" Xiahou said, "It's enough that the West Hill, His Majesty, and the Academy can tolerate me. This means that heaven can tolerate me. As long as heaven can tolerate me, no one in the world will dare to not tolerate me." Tang said, "The Emperor of the Tang Empire can tolerate you because of your military achievements. Maybe he wanted to get rid of you long ago, but he didn't want to have a direct conflict with the West Hill. He didn't have any evidence, so he sent you to the border. The reason why the Academy didn't kill you is that the people in the Academy have long forgotten how to kill. Maybe what you said makes sense." Xiahou looked at him expressionlessly and said, "But you are not the Haotian Taoism, the Emperor of the Tang Empire, or the Academy. So you can't kill me. And now in the whole world, only you want to kill me." Tang said, "Why can't I kill you?" Xiahou looked at the blood-red giant knife in his hand and the terrible blade that penetrated deep into the ground of the grassland. He said, "Because the divine knife has dimmed in your hands." Tang said, "Your armor has also been broken." The battle robe that Xiahou was wearing was a new one that he had changed in the morning. At this time, it had already been shredded by Tang's blade, revealing the armor that glowed with a metallic luster. He was the Defender General of the Tang Empire. The armor on his body was personally designed by Professor Huang He of the Academy and supervised by the Academy. It was engraved with complicated talisman lines that could provide him with seemingly endless protection. However, even though it seemed endless, it was not truly endless. Last year in the north of the Hulun Sea, the blood-red giant knife in Tang's hand had left a deep mark on the armor. In recent days of continuous battles, the armor had become much dimmer than in the past, especially near the chest and abdomen. There were even a few cracks, indicating that it would break. This armor wouldn't be able to last much longer. You have been injured all the time. Xiahou looked at the fist marks and bloodstains on Tang's chest and abdomen and said, "And you have been seriously injured. If you were in good condition, it would probably take about 4,000 armored black cavalries to trap you. But now you may die in the iron hooves at any time. If you want to kill me, you must be prepared to be killed by me at any time. Only if you can break my legs will your cavalry be able to trap me." Tang said, "But you know it is not easy to break my legs. You tried to do this 3 times in a row, but you did not succeed." "You will never succeed." After a short pause, he said, and you're also constantly getting injured. Xiahou said, my injuries are lighter than yours. Tang said, but you are older than me. Xiahou said, we are both disciples of the Enlightenment doctrine. Do you still believe the nonsense of old age and weak health? Tang said, old age does not mean that my body is weak, but my spirit is definitely not as good as it was. For example, you are more afraid of death now than before. Of course, you have been afraid of death since you cooked murong. Xiahou was silent. The older one is, the more easily he is afraid of death. The more cowardly one is, the more easily he is afraid of death. And the more afraid one is, the more easily he will die. Tang looked at him and said, as long as you do not return to Chang'an, I will always follow you and continue to waste time with you. I want to see you die in front of me with my own eyes. Xiahou did not say anything else. He turned and walked down the meadow. The flute suddenly sounded, and the hooves around the meadow thundered. Hundreds of heavy armored black cavalries rushed toward Tang, who was standing quietly on the meadow like a stream of iron. Xiahou walked toward the military camp in the distance without looking back. Hearing the roaring flames on the meadow behind him, he did not look back. Listening to the thunder-like impact, he still did not look back. After 3 consecutive attacks and counterattacks, Tang never made a move. He never found a chance to hurt Tang's leg. So Tang would never let himself fall into the vortex of the charge of thousands of cavalries. From the moment he betrayed the devil's doctrine, Xiahou knew that this day would come sooner or later. But he did not expect that the devil's doctrine was not responsible for killing the traitor, but the disciple of the 23-year cicada cultivation. He admitted that Tang was right. He was indeed more afraid of death now than before, but he was not worried that he would die in Tang's hands or legs. Because although Tang was one of the most powerful people in the world, he was also afraid. If it was the 23-year cicada cultivation, he had no choice but to escape back to Chang'an. Xiahou thought so. Dozens of old houses and new houses had changed owners by the Yanming Lake at the foot of Yanming Mountain. The new owner did not make too many changes to the lakeside houses. He did not completely demolish and rebuild them, but he still spent a lot of money to renovate and tidy up the lakeside. Hundreds of workers and more than 10 carts gathered by the lakeside and began to remove the lake mud. The gardener invited from the scholar's mansion began to direct the boatmen to plant lotus in the lake. The owners of the old houses who had just moved away heard about what was happening here. They brought the old and the young back to Yanming Lake to see what was happening. Seeing the lake mud being removed by carts, seeing the boats planting lotus in the lake, and thinking about the beautiful scenery next year, they could not help but feel envious. Envy was envy. Perhaps there was some regret, but there was no jealousy or hatred. The people of Chang'an had always been praiseworthy in this aspect. Since the new owner had spent money, then the other party should spend money to renovate Yujing. This was all the enjoyment that the other party deserved. The renovation of Yanming Lake was organized by Mr. Chi's Fish Dragon Gang. Ning Ke only asked them to temporarily not change the structure of the house and to plant more lotus. He did not know the specific construction and did not want to participate. So he still lived in the old brush pen shop on Lin 47th Street. Darky specially reminded me that Xiahou is afraid of water. Ning Ke sat by the well and looked at the quiet and dark well water. He said, but I don't understand why a powerhouse at the peak state of martial arts would be afraid of water. Maybe Xiahou deliberately said that to deceive people. So I will not try to drown him. I decided to kill him and then plant him in lotus. There is one more chapter, to be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 434. In late spring, it was getting hot and humid, but the brick-lined well was cool. Ning Ke sat on it and didn't want to leave. He waved the kitchen knife in his hand and talked excitedly. Sang Sang hung the clothes on the line and wiped her wet hands on the apron. Then she walked back to the wall and picked up the pen. After finishing the last piece, she asked, "How do we kill him?" Ning Kei left the well and walked to her. He pointed to something on the wall and said, "First, then kill him." Sang Sang put down the pen and looked back at him with a puzzled expression. The thing on the wall was a wooden figure with a pedestal. Ning Kei carved it himself. Sang Sang painted it with a thick layer of black paint, and there was a small black pot on the head of the wooden figure. To kill a person, you have to hit his body first. That is to say, you have to break his defense first. Ning Kei pointed the kitchen knife at the little wooden figure and said. Then, he swung the kitchen knife horizontally and forcefully made a cut on his forearm. A moment later, the white cut on his arm was faintly oozing with blood. After I inherited youngest uncle's mantle and joined the devil, my body has become incredibly strong. As you can see, Xia Ho is a powerhouse of the devil's doctrine. You can imagine how strong his body is. He showed his cut forearm to Sang Sang and explained. Sang Sang scooped up a ladle of cool well water and washed the blood on his arm. Then she took out a handkerchief from her sleeve and wrapped it carefully for him. While she was doing this, Ning Kei continued his analysis. Xia Ho betrayed the devil's doctrine and joined Haotian Taoism. He became a visiting professor of the West Hill Divine Palace. To help him hide his identity, the Divine Hall may have taught him the secret method of martial arts cultivation. It's not maybe, it's certain. He looked at the black paint on the wooden figure and said, Xia Ho can use his psyche power to mobilize the chi of heaven and earth and condense it on the surface of his body. This layer of defense is like the paint on the wooden figure. The most troublesome thing is his armor. Ning Kei knocked the small black pot on the head of the wooden figure with the kitchen knife. The armor of the 4 generals of the Tang Empire was made by the Academy. The one on Xiao's body is the same. It was designed by Professor Huang He and made by 4th brother and 6th brother. Although it may not be as powerful as the one on Su Shi's body, it is still very powerful. Armor, protective genuine qi, and the terrifying physical body of the experts of the devil's doctrine. These are 3 layers of protection. They can be used day and night. I think even the primordial 13 arrows can't penetrate them. Sang Sang couldn't understand such a tasteless and uninteresting joke about day and night and 3 layers of protection. She paused for a moment and then thought of the Academy's attitude. She said worriedly, assassinating the general of the empire. Even the Academy will not allow you to do this. Ning Kei said, when did I say that I would assassinate him? Sang Sang asked, why don't we expose the relationship between Xiaoho and the devil's doctrine? I promised eldest brother that I wouldn't tell anyone about Xiaoho's identity. After a short pause, Ning Kei said, including his relationship with the Empress. Sang Sang asked in confusion, but you told me. Ning Kei said, you are not someone else. Sang Sang nodded and said, that's true. After a moment, she thought of the calligraphy auction at the stone house and said, you can't even solve Xiaoho's problem. Why do you have to offend the crown prince of the South Jin Kingdom? Ning Kei didn't know how to explain it to Sang Sang. He couldn't possibly say it in front of her. At that time, when he heard that the crown prince of the South Jin Kingdom wanted to buy the chicken soup calligraphy to please the calligraphy addict, he felt angry for no reason. What were cultivators to us in the past? He changed the topic cleverly. Sang Sang thought of the conversation she had with Ning Kei in the city of Wei as a child. She thought of the burned record of the Tao and said, back then, cultivators were immortals in our eyes. Ning Kei said, then I am immortal now. We are immortals. Sang Sang laughed happily. Ning Kei said with a smile, I'm not even afraid of the crown prince of the Tang Empire. Why would I be afraid of the crown prince of the South Jin Kingdom? Sang Sang reminded him, the Tang Empire doesn't have a crown prince. Ning Kei's smile faded and he sighed, this is another troublesome matter. At the back of the mountain of the Academy, by the stream behind the blacksmith's house, under the big water cart. Ning Kei, fourth brother and sixth brother squatted by the stream and stared blankly. After an unknown period of time, sixth brother raised the black iron object in his hand to the sunlight. Ning Ke and fourth brother's eyes followed his movement. It was an iron object that looked like a small wine pot. There were many lines carved on it. Those lines were deep into the money and most of them were straight. They couldn't see any deeper meaning. Sixth brother touched the lines on the small iron pot with his thick fingers and said, "It's uniform enough." For a master blacksmith like sixth brother, the difference that couldn't be seen by the naked eye couldn't escape the touch of his fingers. If his fingers judged that the lines were uniform, then they must be uniform. These lines cut the area of the iron pot into 64 pieces. It's not exactly the same, but it's close enough. Especially the depth of the lines and the bearing capacity of the curved surface, it can ensure the uniformity when it breaks. Fourth brother picked up a branch from the side, pointed to the small iron pot and said, "Junior brother's idea sounds very reasonable, but I tried it with gunpowder last night and it didn't work. I don't know if we should deepen the engraved lines a little bit, maybe in this way we can guarantee that it will break." Sixth brother shook his head and said, "If the lines are deeper, the internal stress of the iron pot will be destroyed and the structure will disperse. Once it breaks, it will just be a firecracker." Ning Ke hesitated for a moment and asked, "How about we try it with the real thing?" "Really? Maybe it will work." "I think so." Sixth brother looked at fourth brother. Fourth senior brother nodded. There was a spiral mouth at the top of the small iron pot, which was a perfect art carefully carved by sixth brother. Ning Ke unscrewed the iron pot stopper and said, "Even if it doesn't work, we can sell it as a wine pot." Sixth senior fellow apprentice smiled honestly. Ning Ke took out a yellowish fire talisman and stuffed it into the iron pot. Then he tightened the stopper. "How?" Sixth brother asked nervously. Fourth brother pointed to the clear stream in front of him and said, "Throw it in." Ning Ke was a little nervous. Hearing this, he threw the small iron pot into the stream. "Wait a minute." Sixth brother ran back to the iron-making room and carried 2 huge fine iron plates. He erected them by the stream and put them in front of the 3 people. Fourth brother said unhappily, "Even if it succeeds, how powerful can it be? Why are you so nervous?" Sixth brother said seriously, "When youngest brother was developing the talisman arrow, fourth brother thought of the pavilion in the mirror lake that was half collapsed." His expression changed slightly and he stood behind the fine iron plates. Seeing that everyone was ready, Ning Ke closed his eyes and his psyche power slowly seeped out from his sense of perception. It passed through the iron plates in front of him, through the clear stream and into the small iron pot at the bottom of the stream. Then it fell on the talisman paper. As the psyche power entered the small iron pot, there was also a pure great spirit. The fire talisman in the small iron pot at the bottom of the stream suddenly burned violently. But it was confined in a very small space. After a moment, a deafening explosion resounded in the stream. Boom! Accompanied by a shrill roar, countless iron pieces shot out. Talk, 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 talk. The sound gradually subsided. After a long time, the 3 academy brothers behind the fine iron plates cautiously poked their heads out. Their academy uniforms had been completely soaked by the stream. Looking at the fragments of the small iron pot that were deeply embedded in the iron plate, thinking that if they didn't have this layer of protection, these iron fragments would have shot through their bodies like arrows. The 3 of them became abnormally pale, and a lingering fear surged in their hearts. Fourth senior brother, who was usually the calmest, looked at the dead fish floating in the stream and the half-collapsed water wheel in the stream. His voice trembled as he said, "Little junior brother, what are you doing? Tomorrow is Saturday, but we have a holiday, so there is no rest. Have a good weekend, see you tomorrow." To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidien.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 435. The bank of the stream was not blown up, but many fish in the stream were killed. They turned their white bellies and floated on the muddy water. Sixth brother stared at the stream and suddenly said, "This is better than the primordial 13 arrows. Any talisman master can use it, but the manufacturing process is a little more particular. It is difficult for the craftsmen in the Ministry of Works to make it. Moreover, most talisman masters are weak, so it is difficult for them to get close to the city wall on the battlefield. These small iron kettles that can explode are used to attack the city, and they are always successful. If, as you said, there are more talisman masters, and they are all as strong as youngest brother, the Tang army will definitely sweep the world without any scruples." Fourth senior brother murmured. The paleness on his face gradually faded away. His usually calm eyes were still filled with shock, as well as some other extremely complicated emotions. Master Yen Sei really has a unique vision. I always thought that although my junior brother's aptitude in talisman Taoism was excellent, it was not as good as the calligraphy addict. Thinking of the talisman arrow last year, I realized that what Master Yen Sei valued most was the fantastic ideas in your mind that were completely not limited by the rules. He suddenly made a deep bow to Ning Quebec. Ning K was startled and hurriedly avoided. Fourth brother straightened up, looked at his eyes and said very seriously, "Talisman masters in the eyes of the world are powerful, but they are often restrained in the battle. Today, youngest brother, your wonderful ideas let talisman masters have offensive weapons. I thank you on behalf of all the talisman masters in the world. Don't tell others about this for the time being. It must be kept secret." Fourth brother murmured, "I have to ask the teacher first. It is too dangerous, too dangerous." There were countless dead fish by the stream, and the water wheel was broken. Ning K walked to the iron plate and tried to dig out the fragments of the small iron kettle deeply embedded in the iron plate. However, he found that he could not dig them out with his own strength. He could not help but say, "This is not scientific." According to his design and calculation, the fire talisman burned in the small iron kettle. Because there was too little air in the iron kettle, even if it could successfully explode, it should be far less powerful than the experimental results. So he thought it was not scientific. Suddenly, he remembered that when he activated the talisman paper, he had sent some great spirit into the small iron kettle. In essence, the great spirit was the absolutely pure chi of heaven and earth. When the talisman made by a talisman master was not very powerful, if the talisman paper was provided with sufficient pure chi of heaven and earth, the power of the talisman could be greatly enhanced. This was the method that he had thought of when he accepted the challenge from Monk Guanhai of the Lank Temple and meditated for half a day by the Yanming Lake. Previously, he had poured some great spirit into the small iron kettle, which was equivalent to pouring liquid oxygen into the small iron kettle. The liquid oxygen helped the fire talisman burn fiercely, which made the power of the explosion much greater. Apart from himself, could other talisman masters do this? Ning K stood by the stream, frowning and thinking hard. He thought that if he really wanted to use this method on the battlefield, the talisman master needed to have a strong enough control over the chi of heaven and earth. In other words, this method had a high requirement for the talisman master's state. There were very few talisman masters in the world, and there were even fewer talisman masters who could enter the upper see-through state. It seemed that it was still wishful thinking to rely on the small iron kettle to change the pattern of the war in the world. However, it could at least change the situation of the battle. The loud noise by the stream startled the people in the back of the mountain of the academy. However, the first to arrive at the stream was not a person, but the proud big white goose. The big white goose looked at the murky stream water and the dead fish floating on the surface. Perhaps it was sad that its pet had been killed. It straightened its neck and squawked at the three people on the other side of the river. It seemed especially angry. Fourth brother and sixth brother walked directly behind Ning K and kept silent. Ning K thought bitterly, was this the meaning of the dead younger brother but not the dead senior brother? He did not want to fight with this guy by the stream. This guy looked very strong, and even if he won, there would be no glory. He hurriedly comforted, don't be angry, don't be angry. Tomorrow I will buy 2 baskets of fish and pour them into the stream to play with you. Wooden fish, don't be angry, this is a sacrifice that must be made for the progress of science. The big white goose second brother raised was called wooden fish. The brothers in the back of the mountain of the academy did not know why second brother gave the big white goose such a name. No one in the academy cultivated Buddhism. According to Seven Sisters' private analysis, it was probably because second brother habitually used the stick on his head to discipline the big white goose, just like knocking on wooden fish. That was why the big white goose was named wooden fish. Seventh sister could discuss and guess at will, but the other brothers did not dare to ask second brother for confirmation. After all, the proud big white goose had never shown the sacred beast of the Buddhism sect. It would not resist when people knocked on its head, and it would accept it submissively. For example, at this moment, no matter how Ning Ke comforted it, it was ready to jump over the stream and fight with him. Fortunately, second brother came at this time, and the big white goose sadly shook its butt and left. Eldest brother also came. He looked at the stream for a long time and looked at Ning Ke blankly. He slowly asked, "Teacher was taking a nap and was woken up by the noise. He asked me to come and ask what happened." Second brother respectfully said, "When teacher and senior brother traveled, the back of the mountain was often like this. It happened after youngest brother entered the academy." Ning Ke thought to himself, "Why does this sound like a complaint?" Fourth brother nodded and said, "Today's test is the small iron kettle designed by youngest brother." Ning Ke explained the small iron kettle to the 2 senior brothers. Sixth brother took out 2 small iron kettles from the smithy and handed them to the 2 senior brothers. Eldest brother looked at the carved little iron kettle in his hand and praised, using space to suppress the fire, and then using the fire to attack space. Using the theory of firecrackers in a talisman battle, youngest brother's design is indeed wonderful and interesting. But, everything needs air to burn, even fire talismans are no exception. This is the reason why fire talismans cannot be used in the depths of the ocean, but I don't know why youngest brother's fire talisman burns so fiercely. Hearing this, Ning Ke immediately admired eldest brother from the bottom of his heart. Only then did he understand why eldest brother was always the head of the academy. The knowledge related to burning was, of course, easy for him, but he did not expect eldest brother to understand it so thoroughly and instantly think of the problem. Eldest brother might be slow in everything, but his thinking was fast. Ning Ke privately told eldest brother about how to use it and the matters related to the Great Spirit. Eldest brother thought for a moment and came to the same conclusion. Cultivators who could use small iron kettles must be able to make more powerful moves than small iron kettles. It seemed that those small iron kettles were the most suitable for Ning Ke in his current state. However, eldest brother did not think that Ning Ke was doing useless work, or that it was just a trick. He seemed to have guessed Ning Ke's intention of making small iron kettles. Eldest brother did not point it out, but just sighed and left the stream. Ning Ke stood by the stream and thought for a moment, and then left as well. On the meadow, second brother's little attendant was feeding wolves, horses, geese, and old cattle. The little fellow was responsible for the food and daily life of these guys in the back of the mountain of the academy. In the past, Ning Ke fed the big black horse precious food such as sealwort from sixth brother. Only now did he know that those were all dug up by 11th brother when he tasted the hundreds of grasses and flowers in the back of the mountain. Every time he thought of this, he was very envious of these guys' food and treatment. After talking with the little attendant for a while, Ning Ke inquired about second brother's plans in the afternoon, and confirmed that second brother would not appear in the pavilion in the middle of the lake in the afternoon. Ning Ke played with the big black horse for a while, galloping wildly on the meadow for a while, and then quietly went to the pavilion in the middle of the lake. Seventh sister was sitting in the pavilion in the middle of the lake with her head down to embroider. The lake light shone on her face through the embroidery frame, making her look extraordinarily beautiful. Ning Ke sat beside her and said with a smile, "Senior sister, second brother is not in the pavilion." Why do you have to pretend to be elegant and quiet? Seventh sister raised her head and stared at him fiercely. She said, when did I pretend? Ning Ke joked, didn't you hear the loud noise by the stream? Seventh sister said, do you think I am like a scholar who can be deaf whenever I want? Then why didn't you go to see the fun? I don't like to see the fun. Look, this is what you're doing. Can you say that again? I mean, every time there is fun in the back of the mountain, senior sister is always the first one to arrive. You are really warm-hearted and kind. Seventh sister said sarcastically, I don't know what strange things you have come up with this time. I don't want to see them. It is more important to guard my pavilion. The pavilion in the middle of the lake was destroyed by Ning Ke's talisman arrow last time. Ning Ke said, speaking of which, I have really found something interesting recently. Seventh sister's eyes were already a little dazzled from embroidery, and she was already a little tired of pretending to be elegant and quiet. Hearing this, her eyes suddenly lit up and she asked, what is it? From the underworld market? Ning Ke shook his head, took out the house drawing of the Yanming Lake, and put it on the embroidery frame in front of her. He said, I bought a large house a few days ago. Seventh sister looked at the lake line on the drawing and said, it is really good to live near the lake. Ning Ke said, this lake is the left eye of the God-stunning array. Seventh sister was slightly stunned. She looked up at him and did not speak. Ning Ke pointed to the Yanming Lake on the drawing and said, I want to use the left eye of the God-stunning array to set up a tactical array in these houses by the lake. But senior sister, you know, I am a little stupid in this aspect. When I asked you to set up a few array flags, you could set them askew. So you are not stupid, but an idiot. Seventh sister corrected him. Ning Ke asked, senior sister, are you interested? Seventh sister's eyes were getting brighter and brighter. She had long been attracted by the drawing and did not look at him. She said, of course, setting up an array is more interesting than embroidery. Ning Ke nervously rubbed his hands and said, can it be done in 100 days? Seventh sister said, what kind of tactical array do you want to set up? To kill people or to guard against people? Ning Ke said, is there a kind of tactical array that can transmit my psyche power to every corner of the lake? Seventh sister waved her hand and said, that is easy. 10 days will do. See you tomorrow. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.